Lord Lost and Found. Good morning, Watto and welcome. Excuse me while I'm snacking. Fearless, Watto and welcome. Hello, hello. Hope you all got coffee ready. Or time zone appropriate beverages. Sorry, Megaboss. I love the idea that that's the wrong dog in video games. Sure does smell like immersive sim in here. Oh, buddy. I have been tweaking the setup video-wise, so it's gonna be a bit janky. But anyway, how are you all doing? Keldra, Watto and welcome. Coming in. Ortrazini, welcome. Alright, get it out of your system. Sorry, Fearless was like, does the stream represent the Paratext, the video essay about Paratext? That depends. Does this shape your thoughts, opinions on the prior one as to be vital to the text? I'm still getting something that vaguely resembles breakfast in me, so. How you all doing?
And now, if I switch it to delay...
Bismarck, Lost Flowers, Watto and welcome. Come on in, friends, coming in. Oh. I just realised I've got to control Discord stuff with my phone at the same time. Oh, this is a spiritual sequel. Okay. So, Squarepeg and Lance and Navalis and Eriman and Gittin and Steppagen, Watto and welcome, friends! How are you all doing? Tell me your tales.
Thank you, son. I'm proud of you.
I will say.
My boy is right. I've been all alone, just a father and son in a broken home.
So Captain Steph, Watto and welcome. I do not know what you mean. Wet paint, Watto and welcome. Hello, hello.
Overall impressions, obviously.
Wet paint. It's a lovely thing. You're coming in and being like, "Hey, I'm still catching up on, VODs and whatnot." But just popping in to say hi. So, Webpaint Gaming, I hope you're having a lovely day. Ah! So, Mizliz the Lizard, Watto and welcome. It's lovely to meet you. They were saying, had a goofy discussion about how their first time playing a FromSoft game was last week in an Elden Ring stream. They've been literally watching all of Vatavidia and Smowtown's videos. Yo, I don't know if we'll get into that specifically. Okay, I don't want to bury the lead. Let's wait for Dan to get in. But one of the reasons why I actually reached out to Dan was discussing this when it came to... Why don't I always put this playlist on? Because it's value select. I do love value select. So one of the things that got us to reach out, well, got me to reach out to Dan, was we were talking about this after the last World of Warcraft video went out, and a discussion of Paratext, and how things like the Bloodborne lore videos and Dark Soulsian things, where do those videos fit into this discussion, where the creator is intended to unfurl the story in a certain way, right? But then external individuals recontextualize it and present it in a much more direct format that then allows users to access the same story beats like quicker and faster. Like, where does that all come into it? That's what I'm hoping to chat about today, you know? Anyway, sorry, my manners are all over the place. So, Lance and Ludo History, Legend, Watto and welcome, friends! Okay, Legend of Morin, it was 1 AM, and in fairness, I just got started, so it's all good. Get some coffee in my system. Yeah, Agonanarchy, I've been in a similar kind of space. I don't want to get into it because That's a whole other big old topic that I'm trying to address with external video stuff. But yeah, the tonal whiplash of going from what I was working on to this is very, very notable. To Halt Grimbo and to Kindle, I say, Watto and welcome! See, Ms. Okay, sorry. Ms., it's lovely to make your acquaintance. Let me just introduce myself very quickly. I'm Will. I worked in the games industry for about 10 years. I do this show for a living now, and I fucking love getting into the absolute guts of the art and intent of video games. Love talking about this. So, like, scratching away at how YouTube breakdowns of Dark Souls and Bloodborne lore reshapes how we see those titles is fascinating, because you were saying you're not good enough to get anywhere in the games, but that's the thing. I mean, okay, I'm not good, but I've played an obscene amount of those games. But there are details that I miss because of how it all comes together, right? But people who, for a living, research these games and construct these breakdowns are able to recontextualize the narrative in a way that I can understand. Well, the details I might have missed. It's not quite here's what you didn't spot in a clever movie, or here's what the book was really saying. It's like, here's all the information that was there, but if you didn't get to this point of this chalice dungeon and get this object, you wouldn't know how it affects this part of the narrative, because how it, like, yo, it's so much good stuff! Sorry, an agony apple. And at that point, I forgot what words were. Agonaniki. Thank you for gifting a sub to Wet Pain Gaming. That's feckin' cool. Wet Pain, I'm glad you're enjoying the VODs. If you see Scotty either here or in YouTube comments, give him a big thank you, because it's only thanks to them that the VODs don't suck. When it was just me, it wasn't good. It was bad. And Megaboss, that's really kind of you. Thank you to Ms. Liz the Lizard. Oh, and Thrain with a cheeky snipe there. The question, Thrain, is with the time that we have between now and our guest joining us, what will you do with this newfound power? That's the question. That's the question. Well, see, Immortal Len, with Nier and Drakengard, that's less Paratext and more...
Rub-a-dub-dub, here for the sub. Enjoy. Smile.
Mal, how are you doing, mate? Mal, like, thank you kindly for 35 months. I hope you're doing great. Like... No, just Mal, thank you. Jumping back in, so what Immortal Len was saying is about the Nier Drakengard connection. Now, that doesn't count as Paratext, in my humble opinion, because all the information's in the title. But it's only if you've gone hard would you find it, right? If you're wondering what I'm talking about, one of the super duper whooper endings to Nier, as in OG not Automata, shows one of the iconic scenes from Drakengard. So they are, albeit tangentially connected as universes. But you'd only know that if you went hard. And when you start adding the user's abilities into that... Sorry, Amos is running about. I'm just making sure we're not going to have to deal with a sea of P. We do not need a return of the Piss Means War. But with the Nier Drakengard connection, it doesn't reframe too much of the titles, but knowing that they're all one cohesive universe does start making a whole bunch of sense.
Walking home last night through busy streets, can't handle the heat of the city. To my surprise, a car comes rushing by. I stopped to
Well, and
Viking 64 waffle down, Viking 64 waffle Olson, Viking 64 waffle hype, Viking 64 waffle folding, Viking 64 waffle ideas, Viking 64 waffle hype, Viking 64 waffle.
So Quasi, thank you for the 200. And I'm super excited about this. We get the train going. Because here's the thing, friends, like, I met Dan 1,000 years ago at PAX. real cool. I didn't know Dan's work at the time, and actually ended up looking it up after we. I mean, dude was filming a bunch of stuff for PAX. I was just chatting with him. Looked up his stuff afterwards and was like, "Oh, this is pretty fucking cool." And the deep dives that he has gone on specifically have been another contributing factor to helping me frame how we talk about games and how they make us feel and why they're so fucking great. And the Paratext one, back in, it clicked a little switch in my brain. It gave me language to understand something that I'd been struggling with, specifically around the subject of like MMOs and how they evolve and change. Well, so Ludo history, I don't want to bury the lead too much, but we were talking yesterday about how Deus Ex Mankind Divided had the whole augmentation apartheid angle that was a huge part of their marketing push. And there's so many ways to go into it, and like, we've discussed this a few times of when should we consider a game's marketing to be part of the conversation. Like, I only want to touch on this just a little bit because it goes in some places, but there was some imagery in Cyberpunk 2077 that upset a lot of people, and I'm not dismissing that they're hurt. It was like a future soda commercial with a very, very hypersexualized trans individual. And this was put out as part of the marketing materials ahead of time and sparked kind of a discussion around it. And separate from its inclusion in the universe, it was very weird, gross. Now, that twinned with the social media communications of whoever was running their Twitter at the time, who got, I assume, quietly assassinated behind the scenes, created a very strange bubble. And for a lot of people, that interaction drastically tinted how they observed Cyberpunk 2077 as a game. When you play the title, it's another one of those examples of why that game is such a disjointed mess. That it's like, it reads as my first attempt at inclusivity, and but then with I believe it's Pan Am, the racing section, which a lot of people skipped because, you know, racing sections in open world video games are as ubiquitous as, you know, a fucking Denny's, and would turn out to be some of the best representation in that whole ass game, and dealt with some really heavy topics from a place of like heart and empathy. So it's like, anyway, sorry, bring it back. You know what? I told you all. We'd be talking about Cyberpunk for years to come, and still are. And not in a negative way. Like, I hit upon this idea the other night while I was drunk as a skunk, which is that Cyberpunk 2077 is the most cyberpunk game. And I don't mean thematically, I mean in its construction. Like, pockets of creative individuals struggling against a gigantic corporate entity that seeks only to make money, desperately trying to put some heart and some creativity into what is essentially just a mass market super commercial product. Like, that sounds like some cyberpunk shit to me. Well, PVS, shout out in future VODs. You've got a little while before, you've got about like half an hour before Dan joins us, so you're all good. I mean, Mega Boss, that's it. And thank you all for starting off the day with a teeny tiny train. Hang on. I'm usually all about this whimsy, but I just want some soft jams. I've been doing a lot of research into a lot of heavy topics over the last like 24 hours and change, so let's have some fantasy themed whimsy. Thrain, the answer to how many Dans I know is yes. Now, jumping back, so Lance was saying, like, the ad in Cyberpunk 2077, that's what I mean is, like, the intent is exactly what you're saying. The intent is to say that in a future where everyone's, like, gender and identity is respected, the hypersexualization of everyone would happen. And it's one of those, like, you can see someone coming up with that concept in an office, in a bubble, without taking into consideration what their art might say outside of that bubble. So, I mean, that's a whole kettle of monkeys we could unpack on a whole day. Kymble, I'm not the person you come to stop you from coming up with cool ideas. Okay, Kymble, why would you be heading for a Germany trip? Because that's the important question. The question, Kymble, is which band? Because I know there's a few bands that are doing their farewell tours this year. Well, Bismarck, feel free to go run for a catch-up. You've got half an hour before we've got a Dan on. So yeah, friends, if you want to put a kettle on, if you want to grab some snacks, now is the time. How are you all doing? I am not going to get into any of the heavier stuff that I've been doing on downtime. I'm doing some research for what was initially going to be some short TikTok videos, but is now wildly becoming a whole topic. But that's really been all I've been up to. Like, the Gandams are helping keep me sane as always. The thing I'm trying to decide though, alright, and this is completely unrelated to anything else. So I got this. Now, this is basically just, what if Gundam, but like nice, clean cut, like white design. And I'm trying to decide what to do with this. On the one hand, I can keep it as is. Like, it's already inked, so it just needs like a bit of cleaning, a bit of touching up. You know, get some of the nice decals on there. Or, the other thing that I'm considering is turning this into a decal-covered abomination. You know, like an Akira's, Kaneda-style motorbike. Just decals up the wazoo. Wait. So, Mr. Lizard, why are you stuffing like 700 to 800 envelopes? Give me the deets. Like I said, we've got half an hour before Dan gets in. What I might do is just for clarity of bant, I might pause alerts again, but we'll see how it goes. Liz is doing the life of an admin assistant, marketing-ish. Greybeard, Watto, and welcome. MDH has a very whiny kitten. Wants you to stop working on things and play. Aww. The baby boy is still the saddest baby boy in the whole wide world. So, there may be a whingy dog in the other room. Ludo says, obviously the answer is get a second mech and do one as a white tie and the other as a decal abomination. Or maybe I should choose a different one to be... No PVS, contain Amos. Maybe I should choose a different one to be our, like, over-the-top decalorama. And Fred, Watto, and welcome. Hello. Oh, front white, back full of decals. Okay. Business up front, party in the back. That's the Gundam way. SCP Amos. Lordy. I will say, Agonaniki, I've been tempted to do a Yakuza-style Gundam. I've been looking at custom water slide decal prints, but so far the ones I can find are really thick and chunky, like the kind you put on like a water bottle that are like dishwasher safe. And I don't know if there's a way to do like the teeny tiny ones. That's it. Nice try, Thrame. Your powers don't extend that far. Doop-de-doo, apples and pears. Welcome, Dan Olson. Oh, got me nonsense. No. Fearless, I actually have considered doing one that was maybe not NASCAR style, but like, you know, with all the sponsorships on. But so Greybeard, there isn't an official JoJo Gundam, but there have been lots of Gundam builds. What a few people have done is gotten the clear kits, the one with like the see-through plastic, and use those as stands for like a basic Gundam, which is real cool. Oh, a Shovel Knight Gundam. That shovel would be a bloody challenge, but it would be interesting for sure. You're right, PVS, the Liam Neeson voice doesn't come across via text chat. I just thought you were really excited to pay attention to some dogs. At the moment, though, like, until Amos's, like, allergies are back under control, like, he's a very sad boy and he's very housebound at the moment, so he's not having a good time. But, you know, I work hard so that my pets can have a great life, you know? So Agonaniki, there hasn't been an official kit based on the Pompadour style. Loads of people have done custom builds, but that's not quite the same. That is what people say about Yharnam, PVS. Is it blood? Yharnam, especially Central Yharnam, has the best dog parks. Fucking way. Anyway, happy Thursday, one and all. If you are very confused, if you have just joined us and you're wondering what the bloody hell we're talking about, it's mostly nonsense and banter. But today we have Dan Olson of Folding Ideas, a very, very prominent YouTube channel, on the show to join us. The reason I reached out to Dan was a while back. Dan put together this video on Paratext in video games. Well, okay, no. The video is about how it's rude to be bad at World of Warcraft. And as an ex-World of Warcraft player, it's something that really, really stuck with me. And the big, like, moment throughout that video was the discussion of Paratext. Now, we'll be probably covering this, but to give everybody a primer whilst we're in the warm-up mode. So Paratext is a concept that was put forward that things outside of, air quotes, the text shape how you see it. So when you purchase a book, the cover art, the title of it, the font used for the title will in some way shape how you perceive the text. So if, as a hyperbole example, if the character of a book is depicted on the art, the cover of the book, then you may very well choose that to be your mental interpretation of the character, even though you have as yet not read the text. When you get talking to some Jim Butcher fans about what good old Harry Dresden looks like, it's interesting to hear people's different descriptions of him. Yeah, legend. See? Wow. Dresden Files. Now, I am by no means a literary scholar, but I do know video games. And one of the things that Dan put forward was that additional sites that plug into MMOs are essentially paratext. They create a language and an understanding. As someone who pored over, sites like Thoughtbot and Wowhead for 1,000 hours, trying to get that extra little bump up, the language that comes from that, like, external research then shapes how you perceive the experience. for me, that was the click moment, because it was where I could put a finger to the change in experience. You know, I played World of Warcraft 1,000 years ago, like a lot of people, and I honestly loved it. Like, I've still got, making sure I'm not doxing myself, you know, I've still got my Horde wallet. But what was fascinating was that those early few weeks were so different than what the experience was like at the end. And going back and playing new characters never captured that same element. And at least in my humble opinion, the knowledge that I gained and the way in which I'd framed how I looked at that world through all the just rampant amount of additional elements I was consuming had changed not just the title, but me. Anyway, after I watched that video, I reached out, and much to my surprise, Dan actually responded. So, yeah, we've got him coming over in about 20 minutes or so, and I'm looking forward to getting into the guts of this. If you haven't seen Folding Ideas on why it's rude to suck at World of Warcraft, or if you haven't seen any of Dan's other work, it's worth a feckin' go, you know? Like, it's something legit special. Now, so video game news, which I will have to pull up on my phone. So far there hasn't been too much today. We're still getting, it's not video games directly, but in board games, we're still getting fallout from the OGL licensing for D&D. To my knowledge, we're still at the point where it's only internal leaks that are coming out. But there was an announcement that Wizards would be delaying the release of the new version, if I stand corrected. We're going to, at this point, we as a squad should wait until we have more concrete information. I'm not giving Hasbro a free pass on how they're treating D&D. It's just, with everything going on all at once, you know, it would be very easy for us to get caught up fighting invisible monsters. Ludo was saying that D&D Beyond delayed their live stream, but didn't know that, because the website has been crashing all day from people unsubbing. Yes, and hey, power to everybody that is putting their money where their mouth is with D&D Beyond, because that is something that that is something that Hasbro absolutely has to listen to. So props to you. And yes, Lance, invisible monsters are a thing in D&D. But the great thing about Dungeons & Dragons is that it was never about the dragons or the dungeons. It was about the people around the table. And it would be sad to see D&D not grasp its solidified place in culture and lock it down. It will be fascinating to see how that opens up the pit, you know. We used to talk about this a lot back in the 90s and the 2000s of how, you know, Games Workshop had an absolute stranglehold on the miniatures game in the UK, and now that it's become easier and cheaper to produce more, now there have been a few missteps, we're seeing far more variety, far more interest. So Greybeard, it's not... Like I said, I don't want to go into some of the heavy topics that I've been researching. When it comes to a lot of these things, we do have to take them in some regards in a case-by-case basis. The reason that I feel a lot of people are putting a lot of stock into the OGL leaks is because of the statement that Hasbro has made about how D&D doesn't make enough money. And these two things coming at the same time have created a justifiable concern. So yeah, we're just gonna see. No, Mega Boss, that's how you win Dungeons and Dragons, is when your character makes out with everybody else's characters. Fuck. Sorry, Wheeler Dealer says, imagine being a gamer. I'm not going to start drinking at noon on a Thursday. Don't make me. Wheeler Dealer, how are you doing, friend? Watto and welcome! And Sean, Watto and welcome. Yeah, Sean, Dan will be joining us in about 15 minutes or so. Fearless has already started. So Gradius is a concern that it might be rooted in jealousy. Do you mean like the discussions on the OGL? I mean, from a community management standpoint, I can tell you that this is one of those situations where the user base has been given a certain level of expectation, and this leak takes the things that they are used to away. Like, the original OGL license was put out in such a manner as to enable whole little cottage industries to flourish. And I mean, it's both a PR and a community nightmare that the unfiltered leaked version went out before any messaging. So at this point, how they handle it is going to be very telling. It's, you know what, a good example to look at is how much of a fucking disaster the paid mods thing was with Bethesda. Looking at that whole campaign about how it leaked ahead of time before they could announce it, it was pushed live with no comms, and just led to an absolute disaster. It could be that the OGL license isn't going to be as aggressive as we're thinking, and it could be that Hasbro are going to start moving a lot of those companies to like a low-cost, no-cost licensing agreement, thus making it so that future companies moving into the space will have to negotiate directly with Wizards of the Coast. That could be one thing they're doing, but this whole setup is a PR disaster. Somebody has fecked up something fierce, and regardless of how it pans out from now, they're going to be doing a buttload of damage control, twinned with the downgrade over the Magic the Gathering stuff. It's all shaping up to be a bit of a mess for Hasbro. Ludo, Worlds Without Number, Stars Without Number and Worlds Without Number, neither are based on Dungeons & Dragons, to my knowledge. So we do not have to worry about those. Also, Fearless, that would be the feckin' smart thing. But it's going to be hard for them to make that... Sorry, Fearless was saying that the smart play would be to treat like fan communities and modules and things like that as an incubator. Something gets popular, buy it, hire the writers, and formally publish that version. Create like a solidified setup without invalidating the previous ones. Like, that would be really feckin' cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to recover it. We talked about it a lot. God, we've just talked about it a lot multiple times. The smart play is to, as we said, is to create a solidified core world with notable places, characters, etc. for Dungeons and Dragons, and use the tabletop essentially for like market saturation. Make your money on merch, be the dominant tabletop system on the planet, and make your money on merch. Which is why this whole OGL nonsense has kicked that whole plan in the absolute non-denominationals. So... Well, so Jackie, we can't draw a parallel between this and Nufta's because there's no market, there's no consumer market for NFTs. There is a consumer market for Dungeons and Dragons. And so how this all pans out will be fascinating. But again, it could shake up the whole space, you know? This could be Pathfinder's time to shine. I mean, at this point, what we're seeing, especially with a lot of the most public tabletop campaigns, is that there is a divorce from the team and the system. A lot of people are always shocked to find out that Hammond Quest isn't an official Dungeons and Dragons product. The person running it is basically using like a homebrew like speed system. And admittedly, Hammond Quest is designed to be live improv entertainment more than it is like a cohesive role-playing system. But it's interesting, that one. It's interesting. And let's be honest, while it may not have been the start right now, you know, people care about, you know, the poster child of tabletop systems, Critical Role, because of the people around the table, you know. People are fans of Matt Mercer and the squad. It's not fans of Dungeons and Dragons. It's nice being able to know the system and understand the lingo, but, you know, it wouldn't take any of those teams anything to change it up. Acquisitions Inc. is a concept in a place. You could change that to feckin' anything. Anyway, sorry. I don't want to banter on this too much because, you know, I know as much as you do when it comes to the tabletop role-playing scene. This is why I try and focus on video games when we're getting into the nitty-gritty, because you know, it's real easy to run your mouth when you don't have any stake in the game. And sometimes ignorance builds the strongest opinions. And I don't want to fall prey to that, you know what I mean? What I will say is that the difference between a tabletop system's thematics and its systems is easily divorceable, you know? So we'll see how it goes. So Jackie, to my understanding, old games based on the OGL setup won't immediately be delisted or... Yeah, and Fred, you know what? That's a conversation that I would have with yourself, or with Ket, or with Kika, or like any of the Baron, you know, like the peeps who really know tabletop stuff. Miguel, Watto and welcome. Hello, come on in. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on the green room because of how I've got it set up. I have to keep an eye on my phone. Oh, shit. Dan's in early. Give me a chance to get everything set up. Alright. I was saying, do you mind if I bring you in early so we get the video set up? Look, alright, my setup isn't the most sophisticated for these interviews, but I make it work, alright? I make it work. But yeah, sorry, jumping back, like Fred, the divorcing of thematic from mechanic when it comes to tabletop systems is something that I would discuss with yourself and others. And I like to think that it could be done, you know. But I also understand that could be putting a lot of strain on a dungeon master otherwise, so. Okay. Let's get Dan in here. Let's do this for realsies. All right, so there's my duck face. All right, I might have to do some. I might have to do some jiggly pokery. Said I wasn't going to do the voice, and I started doing the voice almost immediately. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hey, how are you doing, mate?
Not too bad. Levels, everything fine.
Let's have a look. Looks fine. Do you have camera or not, good sir?
Oh, let me plug my webcam in. You'll hear some rustling and maybe a bookshelf falling over.
It's just this industrial camera being locked into place. Sorry, immediately everyone's like, Will and Dan, what is this? A crossover episode? Okay, I'll put me over here. That way it looks like we're talking. I've got to mess with our visual setups anyway.
Between audio devices, card readers, external hard drives, etc., 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 I have a single free USB slot that gets rotated between the printer, the scanner, and the webcam.
Yep. The precarious situation in which my PS4 is plugged in for capture can be best described as a complete disaster. Okie dokie. There we go. Then
The absolute chaos of my the space around me. Here, should I wear my shutter shades? Is that
if you bring in the thunder. There we go.
all right? I'm ready. I should have chat up.
This is not my best work. Absolutely. I'll be calling out that. Oh, you wouldn't think I'd do this for a bloody.
I'll try to. Yeah, I'll try to help you, and by help you I mean like make your life harder by moving the camera while you're trying to position it.
I see you've played knifey spooning before. There we go. That looks like a professional setup.
There we go.
There we go.
We do. We you can tell we do this for a living.
Right. All right. So, firstly, Dan, mate, thank you for joining me on this.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I've been super excited for this conversation, and to all of you who have joined us, watto and welcome.
Yeah, we haven't chatted in a couple years.
No, not since.
I think like 2017. Oh God, no 2018. 2018.
Yes, because I wasn't at 17.
And then I didn't go 19, and then there wasn't a 20.
Yeah.
And I haven't left the house since.
I mean, last PAX was a good one. Ironically, one of the most safe events I've been to recently. But yes. So Dan, thank you so much. I'm gonna try and do a proper intro, see if I don't butcher it. But friends, crewmates, internet miscreants, it's lovely to make your acquaintances. My current guest is Dan Olson of Folding Ideas, and I've invited Dan to join us to talk about Paratext in video games. I know that sounds like a very, of course. Now the dog is looking around like it's panic time. Amos, why are you like this, my boy? Dan,
well, thanks for having me.
Yourself? I'm gonna make sure the dog doesn't piss on everything.
I'm Dan Olson, aka Foldable Human. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about a wide swath of stuff that all loosely hinges around the concept of narratology, which is narratives. It's about reading the world through the lens of storytelling. So the reason why the subject matter, like the specific subject matter, ends up being pretty broad. I've done a well-performing documentary on cryptocurrency and NFTs. I've done things on video games, on specific movies, on online culture. Is that a lot of this stuff hinges, or I shouldn't say hinges. That's over elevating the lens, but it can be usefully viewed through the lens of storytelling. I didn't prepare that very well, and I haven't had to do that pitch in a while, so little rusty on it. Will's back.
Oh, you couldn't make this stuff up. Amos is our youngest dog. He's a rescue, and he's very sweet.
Yeah.
But he was giving me the you've got 20 seconds.
Right.
So, apologies if you already just covered this, but what I was saying with my lot earlier on was that in one of your more recent videos, like it's rude to suck at World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
You got into the concept of paratext in video games, and it basically lit my little brain on fire. Because I guess it was the piece I was missing to try and contextualize, like, one, my experiences of World of Warcraft, but also how all the conversations and media that we create and consume around games have been shaping how we experience them.
Yes.
And when someone said, is a tier list paratext, I kind of had one of those like wow moments. And that was the kind of shit I wanted to get in with you today.
Yeah, so one of the most important things to cover is that paratext as a term is useful but also limited, and one of the limiting things about it is that it's very easy to sort of create this tortured, ever bloating definition where like everything becomes paratext, and then paratext becomes like this recursive thing in on itself. And so if you try really too hard, like it's very easy to try too hard and just be like, well, is this paratext? Is this paratext? Is this paratext? And that's just going to lead to sort of this like ever drilling down of like, well, yeah, kind of like everything is paratext of everything else. And that's not useful. Like that just ceases to be valuable.
Sorry,
so
the reason why I'm laughing is that yesterday we were getting into the conversation about immersive sims, which is the very same thing. Genre.
Yeah. But genre, yeah. And so the same thing happens. And so you end up with this situation where like it is kind of important to pump the brakes a little bit and just be like, okay, the limitation of this definition is that it can get out of hand. That doesn't make it useless. Like it is still useful to paratext is still a useful frame and a useful word for describing the relationship between two specific things, but it gets useless when you start trying to like draw a definitive outline around like the total body of paratext for World of Warcraft.
So the one I was talking about with my partner, which I thought was fascinating, is when external elements, and this also kind of comes into like medic territory, when external elements become language. I think that's the point where I know it's really a real hyperbole example, but to describe something as a Leroy Jenkins moment is a communicative action that you understand what I'm saying, even though the language of it is nonsense, and it comes from something outside of the game that would then end up influencing the game, but you know what I mean. Yeah. That's the shit where I get fascinated about. Like, it's the Mortal Kombat theme. You know when you've been really excited to talk about a thing and you're just throwing it all around? You
just kind of like scramble through. Yeah.
So to the lovely viewership, the Mortal Kombat theme, as in Mortal Kombat, bim, 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 isn't from Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, no.
It's a banging techno track from the movie. Good old Mr. Anderson put in some bangers, which was so iconic as to become part of the Mortal Kombat video game franchise, where like it ended up becoming canonical from being essentially an interpretation. Yeah, now Lance, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that one's kind of an interesting one because like the relationship between video game developers and filmmakers, particularly in the 90s, was oh boy, almost like plunder is probably the correct word to use. Whereas like it's like, okay, here are these intellectual properties that clearly have value. You know, they're making, like, these video games are making, like, you know, millions of dollars, and they have fans. They have young fans who in the 90s, it was like teenagers had access to a lot of spending money, and were a very easily and heavily desirably activatable market. And it's like, okay, so there's a pile of money sitting there. They like these video games. We can for an investment of like $2-3 million, we can make a movie and probably easily make our returns on that just off of like the brand name. And it was this very like, okay, you know, it was a very Motown relationship. There was a lot of Berry Gordy vibes of like, it's like, you know, so you get a lot of these game developers who have this intellectual property, and someone comes along and is like, we'll give you like $500,000. We'll give you $500,000 up front and 0.5% of like final profits for access to your video game license. And they're like, gee, you want a whole $500 for my songs, Mr. Berry Gordy?
I mean, you joke, but like being on the video game
no,
side,
like the deals were like that bad. They were in fact
yeah,
like that bad for a lot of them.
Well, I guess the thing I wanted to add was, from the video game industry standpoint, like especially during the mid to late 90s, the games industry was still absolutely like idealizing the film industry. That was where we were going to be. Like, holy shit, they're making a movie of your game. Oh shit, that's the big deal.
There was a craving for the perceived legitimacy of like this higher tier of culture. Yeah.
I do want to add, as a small aside, my winter challenge has been to watch every video game movie. So
there's some gems.
There are a lot more good than bad. So, for example,
there are a lot more watchable than truly dire, but there's very few good.
I don't mean to derail our conversation before it's even started. The Wing Commander movie was actually directed by Mr. Cloud Imperium himself.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Oh, no, we don't talk about The Legend of Chun-Li here. We don't talk about that.
Oh, you want me to talk about The Legend of Chun-Li?
The last time we watched it, me and my flatmate killed a box of wine each. I found him half naked on the bathroom floor. That movie did us a damage.
It's so bad.
It's
like
so
that,
bad!
Just like as a movie, like just as a movie, as a video game adaptation, like it's just incomprehensible. And so, but yeah, so you had this real relationship between the film industry and the games industry that was very much just like the film industry going in and plundering IPs that they could get for cheap and then make a cheap movie on, which, you know, that it's like, which was very easy to dazzle a lot of the, it was very easy to dazzle a lot of the game makers with budgets. It's like, yeah, we're going to make a movie with a budget of like $3, maybe $4 million. And these are guys who like made a video game sitting in their garage, you know, like the sum total budget for like a bunch of these video games was like $80,000, you know, $150,000. So like these numbers sound like incomprehensibly huge, and you don't realize that basically what they're saying is they're going to get the cheapest crew they can, and they're going to crank this thing out in 4.5 weeks and dump it in theaters for 3, and then straight to video, straight to aftermarket.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, it's like get it on German television and get your money back.
while we're on the subject of this wonderful derailing, so it turned out the Wing Commander movie did good, but because it was one of 3 films that had the Phantom Menace trailer before it.
Yes.
So people were paying.
I was
to see
working
it.
I was working at a movie theater at the time. I was working at a multiplex, and we had a lot of guys come in to watch the trailer and then leave.
And hey, it made the cash. It made the cash. At some point, we need to watch the straight-to-DVD Band of Brothers movie, which I think is going to hurt people a lot. But that's a tomorrow problem.
I haven't seen that one. But so you end up with this. You've got this relationship, and so the fact that the Mortal Kombat movie ends up being this cheaply made high camp trash that also just happens to be exactly what Mortal Kombat should be.
Yeah.
What a Mortal Kombat movie should be. Kind of their laziness. They got lucky. They got essentially they got lucky by their laziness just happening to be the correct play for a property that was just that like goofball edgelord dumbass camp. It was a property that revolves around it's a property that hinged entirely off of, hey, if you do really good, you can rip your opponent's spine out. And it's like, you got all these sick kills, and obviously the property has like leaned into that more and more over time. But so the Techno remix was an instant hit, and was then like rolled back in a way where a lot of other video game developers who got movies made at the time were very much like, maybe we pretend that didn't happen. We cash the check and then just sort of like go, it's like, it's the movie. They got to make, they got to do what they got to do. Yeah.
It's just one of those things I find fascinating where something can end up being so influential separately as to be folded back into. I hate using the term canon, but I wanted to bring that up because I'm not saying Mortal Kombat the movie is Paratext. God, it really does feel like the immersive sim conversation. But well, okay, you know what? So one of your lovely viewers was in earlier on, and I think it's a good place to start in the conversation, as they were talking about, for example, Bloodborne lore videos. And I thought that was a really good place to get started, because I played a buttload of Bloodborne. I'm doing another playthrough at the moment because it's fucking great. But one of the things that's interesting is that when I first played it, I played it pretty much raw, just as is. And on the current playthrough, it's after I've absorbed all the external materials, deconstructing the story and recontextualizing it as a narrative in a straight old line. This thing happens, this thing happens, this thing happens. And it's very much changed my perception of the story. I can now speak clearly about, the interactions between like the choir and the church and yada yada.
Yeah, and the Bloodborne and like from game storylines in and of themselves are an interesting case, because they are often written in a way that deliberately frustrates. The reason there is a booming market for lore videos of these is because the lore is written in a way that demands interpretation. Unfortunately, a lot of that ends up being just kind of like really banal explainers. But that's still a level of interpretation. That's still a level of engagement. But you sort of end up with this complication in that the storylines, like when you do try to fully unpack them. So like Bloodborne, if you try to fully unpack it and roll it into a single linear narrative, it doesn't work. because it's full of contradictions. It's full of contradictions. It's full of paradoxes. It's full of like just things that would have had to have happened before other things, but are clearly like happening after them. And if you take it holistically and just like as a vibe, you take it as a mood, as an experience, as a theme and setting, and like as emotional resonances, like you walk into this room and you see an event happen, or you engage with a person who died 1,000 years ago, and you fight them and you get their like death soliloquy, that emotional resonance is more important than how it fits into some linear retelling, and that's why it's a video game and not a book.
Also, Holistic Bloodborne is what I should have named my channel, and I didn't, and I will have to live with that regret from now on. I mean, I get real into the paint about how there are certain stories that are only really tellable in a video game space. And like, Bloodborne's a really good example of that, because it is full of like impossible paradoxes if you try and look at it from a linear time standpoint and things like that. But
yeah. And if you put them in a movie, I mean, it's not to say that like movies and books can't do that. I mean, obviously you've got things like, you've got films like Annihilation, you've got Enter the Void, Irreversible.
But no one
you've
would try
got
and
books
take
like House of
Annihilation.
Leaves.
No one would try and take Annihilation as a straight up linear narrative.
Oh, who would do that?
Hey, it's your video, mate. It's your video.
Oh boy. Like you do have things like that, but the degree to which you can do it in a video game, because video games have this benefit of the ludology layer, just the mechanical interaction layer, that this is going to sound like a negative at first, but I do mean this as a positive.
Okay.
Serves as a distraction to focus the user and keep them anchored while all the bug nut stuff happens around them. That you can have a lot of like, so it's what TV tropes would call like a fridge moment, where you engage with something and you absorb it essentially like literally like as presented. You just accept it. Excuse me. You just accept it as presented initially, and then like sometime later you realize that there's something else going on, that there's a disconnect, or there's a contradiction, or a paradox, or a layer of interpretation that you didn't initially catch. And so video games, by being able to have the player focus their attention on their hands, on the controller, on immediate reactions to things that are happening mechanically on screen, you're then able to do all sorts of things with the narrative surrounding that would be intensely frustrating in more linear media. And that's why you do end up with games that do a bad job of this, where the initial gameplay, like it's not distracting enough, and it's trying too hard to be a linear story in a way that is like you end up getting lost in a way of like, I have no idea what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, or where I'm supposed to go next, because like this story that's happening just doesn't make any sense, and it's not helping me. So there's a very deft hand in the From games that manages to that does manage to lead you forward. I think that was a skill that they learned over time. Dark Souls 1 is actually like pretty bad at it. When if you're really honest about it, I love Dark Souls 1, but like it is extremely easy to lose inertia in that game if something goes wrong.
Yes.
And you get just a little too lost.
We're
You
looking
get a
at you,
little too lost.
skeletons.
The skeleton, like there's a whole, oh boy, there's the big pinch points are the graveyard, right around the Capra demon, and then
Oh god,
going
yes.
out into like Darkroot Basin, where like those are the 3 points that, like, when I watch streamers and like when I watch people like play for the first game, if they like, those are the points where they're most likely to just be like, look, I took a break for a couple days. I had to deal with some stuff, like my mom broke her ankle and I've just been overwhelmed with that. And then I picked the game back up and I've got no idea where I am, what I'm doing. I can't find a boss. I don't remember where the last fog gate I saw was. And it's like, oh, it's because you're supposed to go down a side path that's only visible, like that isn't visible when you walk into the area, because of how it's like kind of hidden behind a crook, but it's very visible if you turn around and walk out. And it's like, well, I didn't walk out because I walked in, I got ambushed by something, I spooked myself, rolled off of a cliff and died. And so in my mind, what happened was I reached a dead end and died, and there was nothing down there. I'm not going to go back. And it forever becomes like, it becomes encoded as a dead end. And Dark Souls 1 has a lot of those.
Yeah. What I would recommend, I don't know if you've had the chance to play through it, but lovely viewership, is there is a great title called The Last Hero of Nostragaya, which is simultaneously a Dark Soulsian parody game, but also like a deconstruction of like how people play games. And it is very guilty for that like mid-game inertia loss. And because it's only came out the end of last year, and it uses a lot of like the Soulsian template as its formula, and it's interesting to see how easily it can be missed. Also, I'm going to throw this in there. We don't need to deconstruct this one, but give me a fucking Amazon budget, and I will give you a prequel series based on the fall of the Holy Church from Central Yharnam. That's the show I'd fucking pitch. Just saying. We were talking about this either last Saturday before. You know, Canehurst's already fucked up, and they don't quite know what's going on there, and you've got like, you know, the first shit's going down. Like, sign me up. Sign me up.
So yeah, so I guess to bring this back to Paratext, there is this fascinating relationship between the From games. I mean, really like Bloodborne in specific, in a truly unique way, even amongst the crowd. That is a rich site for cultural study. Because it says a lot about the way that we interact with media, the way that we read media, the way that we teach each other how to read media. And I mean that both in the sense of like training one another, like, here's how you identify a theme and like and connect themes to one another, and also in the sense of like, here is what thing means in a authoritative, definitive, absolute sense. Rewrap your interpretation around that. And the way that, like, despite the fact that Bloodborne is full of these like deliberate contradictions, deliberate paradoxes, you still end up with authoritative readings arising out of that, where it's like, okay, here is the dominant interpretation of it, that has caught on through either, you know, through any of a variety of social mechanisms, whether that just be like essentially organic, like organically arising because it's like popular with a bunch of people, or because somebody really popular like said it and it's like, oh well, that person's an authority, so they clearly know what they're talking about. You know, that I didn't have an ending clause to that sentence, and I forgot what the start of it was.
Well, I think one of the things that's very interesting, and I know we're picking on Bloodborne, but I think it's a nice little case study that isn't an MMO, is that the mechanics to an extent, or I should at least say like the information that we get from the UI, does confirm some of those external theories. Essentially, letting you know you're on the right path. Sorry, again, to my lot who've heard me wax lyrical about Bloodborne till I'm blue in the face, but I keep pointing back to the two main resources being Blood Echoes and Insight, which are the two main, essentially, thematic groups throughout it, and how acquisition of one or t'other pushes you through to progression in different ways.
Yeah.
So far as to say that your interpretations of the little snippets that you get, that everyone pieced together over here, are to an extent confirmed by the title. Don't stop me if I've gone too into the fucking weird, but like the acquisition of more insight shows you more elements that are only
you can
thinking about or inferred.
Yeah.
So we're not just a group of weirdos pontificating around a bonfire. You know, if we guzzle knowledge, we see the big gangly fucker.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the game and the reason why it resonates is because it is so, like, it is a very thematically rich, it is a very dramatically rich game that is very well constructed, very thoughtfully made. Yeah, you know, it is very thoughtfully made with those little, with an eye towards those details of like, oh, inspiration is not just currency B, it's not just the premium currency, it is this, it changes the way that you interact with the game world in a way that is not just progression or gating, but speaks to thematic underlying elements like the amygdala that's been hanging off of the side of the lower church for the entire game. That it's like, oh, that's the invisible thing that mashed me into goo earlier. It was there all along in plain sight. I couldn't see it because I didn't know what I was looking at. And and that's not just, oh, acquire 15 shiny stones and, that'll let you through the door.
Sorry, the wide-eyed stare there was the idea of, and feel free to use this, dear friends, is creating something that resembles a parody of like more modern, especially games of service titles, where the acquisition of premium currency does change your perception of the world. No one would see that one coming. That would be fun.
Yeah. Oh boy, that would.
You couldn't do it as actually paid currency because that would be awful. But if you were doing something that was parody based, God, that'd be good. Okay. So, bringing it back to the core, and again, like, friends, if you haven't seen Dan's video on Route to Second World of Warcraft, please put it on your playlist. The bit that had the big click for me was external resources that become essential. So, I was really struggling, and sorry if I said this while you're already on the line. It's been a morning. But I've been really struggling to put into words how my personal experiences of World of Warcraft have changed over the years. And the thing was, it wasn't my first MMO, not by a long shot. Like, I'm an Ultima Online survivor. I've had an EVE Online corp. I've danced with more MMOs than I'm proud to admit. And I still remember those first, 5 to 6 months.
Yeah, us Runes of Magic veterans got to stick together.
Were you there for Worm Online? I was, for a hot minute. That was too smart for me. But I loved my early playthrough of World of Warcraft. I had such a great experience with it. And that carried me through for many years. And like a lot of people, I tried jumping back into it, tried making a new character,
Sure.
and I couldn't quite understand why I wasn't having the same experience. And I used to assume I was one of those one character and done.
What ho new dilly one guess who got 2 thumbs
Will
and
you just say-
overslept, so he called in sick.
Also, as an aside to an aside, the little doobly-doo at the bottom officially makes you the Jarl of the Day at the moment, as someone gifted you a sub.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I almost
Oh.
missed that. So, congratulations. You have power.
I get my own boat.
Yep. One whole boat, a little shield inside.
We don't call them slaves. They're serfs.
Acquired into.
I don't own them. I just own the land that they live on.
Ah, I see you've seen history.
And I
But one of the things I realised was that it wasn't just that, it was my second run through or otherwise. It was that by the time I went back to start playing other characters, my entire experience of Warcraft was framed by things like Thoughtbot, like Wowhead,
Yeah.
all of those. Even when I was seeking to be unoptimal, optimal was in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
I very much resonated with the story of the bloke with no shoes, because I was a Retribution Paladin back when that was a thing that was a fucking joke. Because
Oh
everyone
boy,
went,
yeah.
don't be a Ret Pally, and I went, fuck you guys.
I mean, and that's a really like complicated thing, because over the course of the game, there's been times where there's a classic blue post where they say, basically in plain terms, we are giving Shaman a 1.3% buff, not because they need it, but because the community has convinced themselves that Shaman are underpowered.
The perception of them has become so negative that they have to give them a boost.
It's like we're giving them a buff purely, like almost purely, to generate headlines on Wowhead and MMO Champion that say Shaman buffs, and then here's a bunch of numbers that your eyes glaze over, and just that in and of itself, in an attempt at like fixing a problem that the community had created for itself by just convincing itself that Shamans were underpowered.
And what's fascinating is you can't put the genie back in the bottle on that one.
No.
Once you
No, you very much can't.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, I was trying to think of some other titles where there was that level of paratext that affects them. The one that I would definitely say is, I guess, any of the battle royale genres.
It's been really fascinating to watch them go through that, because especially because let's just talk about Fortnite. Let's just drill straight to Fortnite, because it's the one that I've got the most experience with in this regard. Is that they started, like, the initial primary body of their player base was extremely young, under 15. I think the median age, like at the time that I made the video on it, so that was like 3-4 years ago now. The median age of a Fortnite player was like 13. And I routinely wound up in games during the 6-8 months that I worked on that. I was routinely ending up in games with 8-year-olds, right? And so you got to watch it go through this process of both sides of the negotiation, of players just playing with, just grabbing guns that felt good because they were either easy to use or sounded right, or you would occasionally just get lucky and they would do things that felt good, and then the gradual realization that oh no, there's a correct answer. If you get a blue shotgun, like the correct answer is blue shotgun, like, or is any shotgun, and just get height and aim down and headshot. And literally nothing else matters. Like fire rate doesn't matter. It just all comes down to your ability to get elevation and shoot down with a shotgun. And that flattened the gameplay, because then it's like, you know, people are picking up all kinds of stuff, and it's like, oh, you find a you know, like, sure, maybe the epic sniper rifle, like you hold on to that just in case you do get into like a really long engagement arena, but otherwise, like, everything mid-range, every SMG, every unless you get like a really good assault rifle with a scope, it's just like, it's like they can effectively be a long range weapon. Anything mid range, you just chuck it. It's because it's just taking up inventory space. Or maybe you hoard it purely so that like the people, like somebody behind you doesn't have a weapon, like, you know, isn't going to get a weapon at all. You know, so you get this initial rush where it's like you pick up everything and you hold it purely so that the next guy that comes along still just has his pickaxe. But that's it. Like you're not intending on using it, and the first opportunity you've got, you're going to chuck it into the you're going to chuck it out of bounds just to delete it out of the game. Because it was all about shotguns and long range engagement.
What I wanted to dig in on that one is it's the conveyance of that information. See, I'm more of a Counter-Strike individual and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is how the spaces and the language around movement and tactics and otherwise completely come from, you know, external
streamers.
Sources.
Yeah. Principally streamers. Yeah.
We are the worst. But I mean, terms like crazy.
Well, it's more like I guess just to sort of hedge that it's like that in the way that FromSoft, like its primary source of authority is the wiki, like is wiki culture, and then YouTube culture. It just happens that Fortnite, its primary source of authority was streamers.
Oh yeah.
And then like Reddit, kind of like in a distant second.
We saw the same thing with pretty much the whole Battle Royale craze. Like even DayZ Battle Royale and Arma 3, like it all came from the streaming community. But what's interesting in that is that where there is no the community creates a commonality of language that then becomes itself this unwritten text.
Yeah.
And that's the point where I was thinking about at what point does that become paratext? You know, when someone chisels it in the grand stone? Because the interesting thing is, and again, you were talking about this with the World of Warcraft sucks, is, you know, the language of how we communicate movement in a space, especially in like pugs and shit like that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just picking on Counter-Strike. I've wasted so much of my life there. You know, the varying tactics and strategies, if someone didn't know the terms, you knew you were in a trash group and you might as well just throw it.
Yeah.
That was, I guess, what I wanted to start scratching on, is how these group communicative languages form and how they become these.
How do you form the convention that, like, okay, Skull is burn target. All right, Skull, you want kill. Why is X second burn target?
Yeah. Why not Blue Diamond? Why not?
Why not? Yeah. Why not?
Well,
why not Blue Square? Why not Purple Diamond? Like, why does X get this like primacy? Why this supremacy? Why does this get so entrenched that it just becomes like convention? And there is no real answer to that beyond just like, well, that's how language works. That's how all human language works. That's how all, you know, so the principal thing to point to is the principal body of work to point to in regards to this is studies of like professional jargon, because it's the same process, because really professional jargon is just a kind of specialist knowledge, and video games are constructed almost in like complex video games are constructed almost entirely out of specialist knowledge. And the ways that those pathways form, the way that those conventions form through just like this gradual process of social consensus is very fluid, and no one it's very difficult to exert specific, direct, intentional control over it. Sometimes you can, and you can get lucky. You'll see games that do, like, you'll spot ways that they put in like a deft touch to like manipulate the way that you talk about the game, the language that you use to talk about the game, and thus the framing that gets talked about the game. But it just as often backfires because somebody puts out, because like, you know, the audience doesn't get it. Someone puts out a very authoritative sounding video on YouTube. Everybody goes and types in like how to do XYZ in video game 1, 2, 3. That video pops up, and that just then becomes like the baseline. And it's like, what's the mechanism at play there? It's like, well, happenstance for the most part.
I mean, this is the point where I can fall back on my video gaming days. That you cannot control how a community will name things, and the more you try to control them, the more they will always rebel.
Yeah, there's okay, so to last raid tier, or not the current one with the current expansion, the previous one.
Yeah.
There was a boss in the Sepulchre of the first ones, named Daosain. Now, this is not a common name. I mean, one, it's not a common name like at all. But two, you know, it's to the American audience a foreign name using that has a bunch of vowel consonant combinations that they're really not used to. So nobody had any, and you're just seeing it in text. It's not said out loud in the game. And so, you know, how do you pronounce this boss's name? And all it takes is one person on the Race to World First, like on a Race to World First, just like throwing up their hands and being like, yeah, we're headed to Dow Sausage next. We're headed to the sausage. We're gonna go fight the sausage. And suddenly that boss just becomes known as the sausage.
As a Monster Hunter player, oh boy, I love Monster Hunter with all my heart, but the amount of times I've gone up against Devil Pickle, Bagel Goose, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Knuckles, you name it. That goes into a different area where, you know, the world building and the lore and the things that the creators have put forward isn't something that can be easily or clearly communicated in the spur of the moment. So you need to be able to. So yeah, the difference between Devil Pickle and Spicy Devil Pickle. But what's fascinating is how these things come together. You know, there's a certain last sea monkey standing when it comes to these references, and especially when it comes to streaming culture, because the crossover and influences of one stream to another is a nebulous thing to track. I mean, shit, if we could get what's his face, the Twitch commentator in here, he'd probably have a better understanding on that one. You know, cross-pollination of communities is a thing. I mean, shit, if I could tell you how that works, I'd make the big bucks. But
yeah,
when it gets to the point of Paratext, there's a certain amount of solidification in that. And so when I'm just pulling an example out my arse here, but if Wowhead puts up a definitive guide on how to beat X-Boss and it uses the sausage example, do you feel that's the point where these very amorphic liquid terms become solidified in that Paratext?
Yeah. Like that they, because at that point it's no longer just like that's the transition point between oral culture and written culture. You know, between something that exists as an in-joke that persists as long as someone remembers to make the joke the next time it comes up, and transitions into being like the act of writing it down or citing it authoritatively solidifies it and preserves it, because it's now written down somewhere in a non-temporal non-temporal medium. Whereas like if you have a hard break, so Sepulchre is no longer the current raid. Let's say 3 expansions from now, so like 6 years from now,
Okay.
they do, WoW decides to start doing like throwback raids, and so Sepulchre just rolls back up in it. It's been 6 more years. No one remembers the joke. Like, and you've got this break, like, or let's just say that, no, let's just create a fictional thing where 6 years from now, World of Warcraft restarts. It restarts in Shadowlands for whatever reason. Literally 0% player base overlap. Nobody remembers the old version. There's no guarantee that
Shadowlands classic.
that Dowsane becomes known again as the sausage. There's no guarantee that same mispronunciation, that same like that same just verbal tick happens again. Whereas if the Wowhead article that refers to her as the sausage, if that somehow jumps this gap, there's then this written record of it. So it's a lot easier to have these breaks in oral history, and this is just, I'm spending a lot of words on a very basic idea of like oral history is more fragile than written history.
No, but this is where I fucking love these conversations, is because one, video games move so much faster, and they move in a way that other things don't. I mean, this is why World of Warcraft is such a fucking great example of this one. So oral history, like, in-jokes, memes, etc., being solidified. Let's look at many whelps, like a dumb internet video that's, older than sin, that became an achievement when Onyxia was re-added at some bloody point. That's now solidified, and how many other mediums can take that additional text, fold it back in to make it part of. Like, I fucking love this shit. And I think that there's a large proportion of the nuances that make this so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in some of the more complicated ways that it interacts with are, of course, like, these aren't just social systems, they're also mechanical systems. They're mechanical social systems. And so you do end up in situations like we had one the other night where so the current raid, there's a couple rings that drop that key off of doing fire damage. So, and one of them is like every time you do fire damage, like you have a chance of just doing more fire damage. Obviously,
it's just better. It's more fire.
It's more fire, and so like obviously anyone who does fire damage, like highly coveted object. And a player rolled on it, and we were just like, hey, or a player won it, and it was a paladin won it. And we're just kind of like, hey, do you do fire damage? And they're like, well, I was just going on, like it's on the best in slot list on Wowhead.
It is.
And we looked at it. Well, it is, but like it is, but it's on the best in slot list for Wowhead because Wowhead is like, it's like, here's the best in slot gear if all you're doing is raiding. And there's only 2 rings that drop in the entire dungeon. There's only so there's no ring itemization in the raid. There's only these 2 fire damage rings they're also the like ultra rare drops off of the 2 bosses that drop them. So it was purely that the instance designers did not itemize jewelry in the raid except for these 2 special items because they intend for you to fill those slots doing crafting, doing other things. But because of this paratext and the authority of it, you then get this social that then leads to like a player just very understandably being like, I looked at the authoritative source, the authority told me to roll on this ring.
Yes. And once you reach a certain point where the paratext is king, then that's what you're looking to primarily. You're not playing. Now, a couple of things I wanted to pull out from chat. I am reading your stuff, friends, and we can definitely open this pit up like in a little bit. But so Slopsity was saying that from a dev perspective, actually sometimes you don't want players to be able to talk about stuff easily, but they always find a way. That is true. Yeah. It's both a blessing and a curse. As someone who played feckin' Chrome Hounds and oh god, what was it? Mindjack and a few that messed with the concept of direct communication, and others that
just to pull an example from the WoW video, threat in World of Warcraft was far more interesting when no one knew what it did. That didn't, but it was also a bad system. Like it wasn't because this is a detail that we didn't get into the video. Was a full breakdown of like, okay, so what happened with threat? The reason why players wound up working so hard to surface the numbers for threat, is because it wasn't working on an experiential level.
Okay.
So there's like you had all of these like intuitive theories about what was going on.
Yeah.
But all of the theories were basically attempting to explain like what people were experiencing. And the real problem is that what people were experiencing wasn't working from a gameplay perspective.
Okay.
And so because what you would think should be happening is that it's like, okay, tanks, they've got all of these abilities that say like, deal like, this is a high threat ability. This does more threat. And it would be vague language like that would just say it's like, this does more.
Yeah.
Like this is a threatening ability. And it was like, okay, but I'm using these and like I've got these. Other classes don't, or if they do, like, they've got the same thing on their tooltips, and we tell them like, hey, elemental or enhancement shamans, don't use Rockbiter weapon because it's a high threat ability. Like it says it right on it. So it's like you get, but I as a tank, like I can't hold a boss's attention as the rest of my raid is getting better geared. My job's just getting harder and harder and harder and harder, and nothing that I do is seeming to fix it. And so effort was put in to go like, okay, what's actually happening here? And that was the impetus for like really, really putting in the effort to surface like the underlying mechanics of threat. And two things happened in that. One, surfacing threat had all of the effects that we talked about in the video in terms of suddenly damage meters are contextualized. But two, it also revealed that like, oh, the threat system is just completely broken. Like the numbers are just completely like wrong for what they should be. So what it was doing is that like Heroic Strike, for example, would do threat equal to damage done plus 20. Or plus a static amount.
Okay.
And that static amount was effectively just like doing phantom damage. And the static amount was not big. It was literally like 100. It was, I think the actual number was something like 150. So it was basically like you had done an extra 150 points of damage. What this means is it's like, oh, so that means that you could literally just do the same amount of threat by doing an extra 150 damage, which you would do if instead of ever hitting Heroic Strike, you just hit Rend again. Or Whirlwind. Or if you were in Fury stance, like if you were in Berserker stance, if you were dual wielding, and suddenly it changed, like the whole thing changes to like, oh, it's bait. It's a bait to actually use your defensive abilities, to use your like tanking abilities, to use like heroic strike, to use provoke, to use whatever,
Okay.
because they just have these fixed modifiers on them that is exactly the same as if you just did more damage. And because of the way that damage works, because of the way that these modifiers are fixed and they don't scale off of anything, whereas hitting rend, hitting whirlwind, hitting revenge, hitting whatever that does, you can just by hitting a higher damage thing, you're going to blow away that like 150, that fixed 150 flat modifier, because it's like, what's better than doing an extra 150 damage is doing an extra 300, doing an extra 400, doing an extra 500, and that translates to more threat. And so they did realize that it's like, hey, Blizzard, the system's broken, these numbers are bad, and Blizzard had to go in and like completely overhaul like all of the actual numbers on these high threat abilities in order to get them to actually function the way that they were intended. And it still wasn't enough, because the scaling on like just do more damage and you will do more threat, one meant that players no longer needed to install a threat meter. They just needed their damage to be below the tank.
Yeah.
So you've gone from 2 meters down to 1. So that's screen real estate reclaimed in a 1024 by 768 world. And you know, like, so there was a whole other thing that was happening there that effectively, like, WoW was destroyed by the fact that the actual numbers underpinning threat were not functioning to the point that players were incentivized to put in the work to pick them apart.
Okay.
Because if they had been functioning intuitively, like you can imagine a version of history where like tanking in World of Warcraft just functioned kind of the way that you assumed that it would, that it's like hitting heroic strike as a tank does more threat, you know, as long as you're hitting it like basically on cooldown, you know, the boss sticks to you, and no one is ever really deeply incentivized to go like, hey, I wonder what's going on down there.
And once you have the need to look elsewhere, then you've created this whole extra, for lack of a better term, space. You don't need to go looking for an explanation to a mechanic if the mechanic works great.
If the mechanic is working the way that you just kind of like intuitively, exactly. Yeah. That you just, if it works the way that you intuitively assume it should, based off of the tooltip, based off of its animation, then you never go poking.
It really feels like, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but it really feels like Threat must have been like a latent development addition or something that was thrown in response to feedback from like, you know, alpha and beta tests, because it really smacks of that.
No, so it was just a system. So Dark Age of Camelot and EverQuest both had a threat system.
Oh god, yes. Dark Age of Camelot was the other one that I spent some time with. I completely forgot about that. Sorry,
yeah, both of them had a threat system for PvE, and it was equally as like kind of simplistic, but neither of them really had like, well, I guess EverQuest did have like high threat abilities, but the big thing is that none of them really ever got popular enough, got coordinated enough that you started running into these friction points that led to WoW being pulled apart. Yeah. So Threat and WoW was basically just copy pasted out of EverQuest. Okay. But well, it was copy pasted at its like bare functionality, but the numbers, like this is the big thing, is that like the early WoW devs had no idea what the numbers really should be. Yeah. And they were so overwhelmed with like the initial, I don't know if the initial projection for World of Warcraft was like 250,000 active subscribers end of year one. That was their benchmark for success.
Which, and by the way, friends, at the time, that was fucking massive.
They were like, if we get 2/3 of EverQuest subscriber base, we are golden. They hit that in a week.
Yeah. God,
And
those first
then
few weeks were rough.
just sailed past it. They were at 1 million end of month 1. So they were 4 times their benchmark for like, we are a successful MMO. We are well poised in the industry. We are a competitor to the peers. Like we're sitting pretty. Their benchmark for success, they 4 timed that in their 1 year benchmark in their first month. And so all of their expectations of like, oh yeah, sort of this like ramp up time that they'll have to like kind of see how players in a non-beta environment like engage with stuff, how like what desire paths form, all of those expectations just thrown right out of the window in favor of like, we need to spin up as many server instances as possible as fast as possible.
Yep. Sorry, jumping back a point, just a quick one that Quasi was saying is one of the reasons why they think that Dark Age of Camelot and EverQuest didn't have the same kind of issues. Amos, you're okay, buddy. You're okay. Is that they did not have the same restrictions on raids and dungeons. So with Dark Age of Camelot, there was always the more bodies, which is one of the things I remember from Ultima Online.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
If you could find more people, you could just solve the problem.
You could just, yeah.
You know, just get a bunch of people.
You just
on
bring
chickens.
more tank. Yeah. EverQuest had the thing where it's like you would just bring more tanks. That it's like, okay, well, we just have another tank ready to taunt the boss. So whenever the boss goes and points at something we don't want it pointing at, just somebody else in this pile of tanks pushes a button to like pushes provoke. Yeah. And then if they get squished, well, we've got 11 more.
Yeah. Now, I understand why World of Warcraft did it from both a design and from a technical standpoint, because it was very possible to crash some of those old MMOs. If you were in a group really trying, you could crash a server.
Yeah, it's funny to look back at like 40 as being this like, you know, it's like these raid caps of 40 were like kind of this aggressive lowering of participation in these events. Where it's like nowadays you think it's like, yeah, you needed to wrangle 40 people together. And it's like, well, no, that was their way of keeping like just an infinite number of people from piling into the raid and allowing the designers to be like, hey, maybe we could have a more controlled experience and make bosses more interesting as a result of having sort of this predictable number of players be around. And yeah,
God.
It is important to contextualize a lot of these early problems as like they were kind of flying in the dark because nobody had really actually like done any of this before, and the people that had done it in like very different ways or with very different environments.
Yeah. I mean, and I know I'm stating something we all know, but I feel for context it is needed that MMOs for the longest time were the hardcore of the hardcore, Like,
yeah,
Ultima Online, EverQuest, all of these were not friendly, accessible games. They were meant to be immersive. They were meant to be like this huge spanning adventure that was all your own. But they were not
you know,
kind.
Ultima Online very deliberately was structured in its initial version around, it's like, well, what happens? Like, okay, we're going to create a world where all of these players can like spill into it, but they all start as like, you know, level scrub, whatever, randomly generated characters. Okay, well, what happens if your initial roll sucks? You know, what happens if you sit down to make your D&D character and you roll all 6s? Like, not all 6s on the dice, all 6s on your stats. It's like, well, your character sucks. Okay, well, what does your future look like in a world that logically follows from the average, like from the denizens of the world all operating off of randomly generated like mechanical statistics? It's like, well, not good. You know, you're going to be bad at everything, and thus your lot in life is probably going to be like sitting on the side of the road hoping that other people take mercy on you and give you stuff. And Ultima Online was like, cool. Yeah, that's what should happen.
You want to be the greatest
if your
swordsman?
stats suck.
Yeah, congratulations. You're going to be punching a tree for 3 days.
Yeah, you want to be good at something, you need to go like hardcore train it up. If you're bad at everything, then you're bad at everything and there's nothing for you to do because other more competent people will do everything else before you can get there.
Yeah. I will say, as a small aside, if I don't know what the status of them these days are, but the Ultima Online RP servers were on point for creating like weight and individuality in characters in that space, but that's a whole nother story. Oh, excuse me.
And oh man, just thinking of like the hardcore stuff that is like, like WoW was considered soft, like baby soft, because you didn't lose experience on death. You just had a monetary penalty in that your equipment all took a hit.
It was an easy game for babies.
But if your equipment broke, you could still go to a repair NPC and just pay money, like the same flat amount of money, and it would go from 0. Whereas in like these other games, it's like, okay, if your equipment gets down to like 1%, you can repair it. If it hits 0, it disappears from the game world.
Yep. For those who didn't play Ultima Online, if you'll show up and stab me up, everything on my person drops on my corpse. It's fair game. And then you can mutilate my body. You could just take my head and have it on as a fucking trophy. Like, it was dark. Corpse runs were a whole different thing back then. It was a different time. Oh boy. And so, I wanted to contextualize that because it's very easy now, in this, the year of Waluigi 2023, to look at early World of Warcraft and be like, psh, those scamps, what were they feckin' thinking? But they were evolving the genre in a way that people hadn't. No one had considered that, maybe everyone wants to play MMOs. Maybe not just the most intensely hardcore. And the tweaks and changes they made were initially to strike a balance between those two concepts, and then they moved more towards the success points that they were already seeing. And I don't resent them for that.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt it warranted for the conversation as it's going. Now, one of the other things when it comes to like the discussion of Paratext as a whole is the spaces in which Paratext is absolutely necessary. And both for the positives and the negatives. I know we joked about the tier listing thing earlier, but I do think that sadly, like, the fighting game community is one where without Paratext, there's no hope, there's no chance. I mean, okay, depending on what your goal is of play, if you want to play Tekken against your mate, that's fine. But if you want to play Tekken in any like public or repeatable space, or even for the online methodologies, like,
there was that tweet going around a couple weeks ago that was like, hey everybody, just remember that a whole bunch of 12-year-olds are gonna get copies of Mortal Kombat. Are going to get a fight, like they're going to get a fighting game and they're going to log into NetPlay for the first time ever. Be kind to them. And it's like, no, online. This is you enter my octagon. Welcome to the real world, kid.
Hey, that's how I learned to play Street Fighter, is get mercilessly pummeled. If you can survive these fists. But so for me, I played Tekken back in the day when it came out, and as a snobby little shit of a child, I was like, well, I play Street Fighter, that's a real game.
Yeah.
Wasn't until I got involved with fighting game community individuals. I was working at Sega QA, and we got 3 breaks. We got a 15-minute break, a half-hour break, and a 15-minute break. And so we do Tekken. You could eat a sandwich and play Tekken at the same time, so we played a lot of Tekken.
Yeah.
And these people took me through like the underlying language of Tekken that's essential to be in that space, and then I really started to enjoy it. But like, at no point is the importance of frame data communicated when you play through Tekken 6.
No.
And yet, it is so important. It was actually inspired by one of your viewerships was talking about the... I guess they were joking with how Hyper Armor got carried over to Dark Souls when Poise got involved. But again, it is not... Hyper Armor as a concept, very rarely clearly communicated. But in certain fighting games, it's fucking vital. And I guess that was the next point that I wanted to go on, where the game is reliant on Paratext for involvement.
Yeah, I mean, fighting games are a really good example because they have such a, they're one of the oldest persistent genres in video games. There was a bit of a weird moment in the early aughts, but for the most part, like a fighting game today and One Must Fall 1 are very identifiably like the same thing. That is like, all right, here's a game. You've got a red dude and a white dude, and they punch each other. All right, here's a game. You've got a red dude and a white dude, and they punch each other. It's just one of them also summons a lizard or whatever.
I see. You're in on the lizard meta.
So it is one of the oldest contiguous genres. Very little about the oh boy, yeah. So it has this very intensely well developed internal language. But then within that, there's all of these different sort of variants of like how the game designers can approach certain types of interactions in terms of like combo breaking. How effective is blocking? Like, is blocking like infinite armor, or is it just a like mitigating thing? Does it function differently against different types of attacks? Not just high-low, but like, do you have like an elemental system underneath for whatever term, where it's like, all right, physical attacks versus magical attacks, or whatever. Do you distinguish between that in your game, or is damage? And the answers to all of those questions can get extremely granular. The accuracy of hitboxes and hurt boxes, like there's so many great memes on Twitch about like making fun of this. In fact, I did the one joke in the wall video with the finger guns, and immediately people were like, it's like, I want to see the hitboxes on those. And so I just did some like Fatal Frame style hitboxes where it's like it's going like a good extra 30% below the actual graphic, and they're like, this is bullcrap.
As a small aside, when I was announcing that you were coming on the show with my lot, do you know how many times the finger gun gif comes up? That thing is everywhere.
It's such a good. I knew that was gonna spread.
But you're right.
I made it to be shareable. But the point being that it's like, but the answers to all of those can be shockingly granular, and they can change dramatically, even within a given franchise.
Yes.
Mortal Kombat is actually probably the most like the best one to point to for this, because it has been what's a good way of putting this? It has had a constant stream of identity crises in terms of mechanically what type of fighting game it wants to be. Does it want to be like a fun arcade button smasher where like, where combos are like relatively easy and they're more about like, it's more about just kind of like rhythm, or does it want to be a really intense, granular, like reaction based? You're dealing with like frame data in terms of counterattacks and like block breaking and all of this other stuff, and it has swung wildly in both directions over the course of the franchise, and so when a new Mortal Kombat comes out, if you know anything about the history of the game, you end up going like, okay, I'm going to wait for the wiki and the streamers and the sweaty guys to tell me mechanically what type of fighting game this even is.
Yes. Now, jumping back into chat, because this was the point a lot of people were making, was because fighting games are based in the arcade, where it was almost like a tribalistic knowledge, where a lot of these mechanics that aren't explained within the context of the game would be communicated between players, and that's grown into this expectation that the users must be the ones who learn these things, you know. And I find that particularly fascinating, you know. And again, much like how, you know, Leroy Jenkins being re-added into fighting games, like Daigo Ohara's infamous block got re-added into one of the re-releases of Street Fighter 3. Like, there's a push and pull from the language around it, but the reason I wanted to bring up fighting games is that to play them is you have to know this language.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you do, like, so you pick up the latest Mortal Kombat, if you don't know what kind of Mortal Kombat you've even picked up, you're gonna have a bad time. I remember, like, I loved Mortal Kombat 9, you know, like the one that kind of really brought Mortal Kombat back. It was a ton of fun, you know. I mean, the campaign was like completely goofball, but I got through it on like the hard setting, and Shao Kahn was just an absolute bastard. My thumbs hurt so bad after the end of it. Oh, but it was good, but it was a very arcadey fighter. And then 10 comes out, and I'm like, hell yeah, grabbing 10. And then it's this really, like, it's a slower paced, much more about like landing specific devastating hits in tiny windows. And I'm like, this is completely different. It is not just like a newer game. It is philosophically a very different fighting game under the hood. And I never finished the campaign because it was like, it's like, oh, this is built for a much more hardcore fighting game audience than me. I probably can't beat this, and I've already turned it down to easy, and I don't think I can. I don't think I am good enough at this to ever finish it.
I mean, this one of the things that, if you want to do another day on this in the future, like talking about like the accessibility in fighting games is something I love nattering on. And actually, to all of your lovely selves watching, like, because the one downside about having these great conversations is people have been bringing up so many fucking great topics and points in chat. Friends, if you want to unpack any of these at a later or future stream, I fucking love talking about this. You're always welcome here. You know, it's literally what I do. What's been really interesting in that space is seeing how the last couple of Guilty Gears, how those have taken off. Because that's another system where you've got to know all the weird additional stuff. Oh boy. I'll let you finish, and then I've got can I jump? Guilty Gear reminded me of this. Okay, so another element of Paratext that we haven't talked about yet, and I think Guilty Gear is a great example of this. Yeah. Is that Guilty Gear has a big fan base that has no interest in ever installing or playing a Guilty Gear game, because they engage with it 100% via the paratext of fan fiction, fan art, and like just the characters. You know what? I'd entirely agree. I mean, there's also bastards like myself who, back in my jumped up teenage days, I was like, oh, you play these fighting games? Well, I play Guilty Gear. I have an imported Japanese disc, don't you know? And now, after a lifetime of bad sleep patterns and gin, like, my reaction speed's shit. So, the only reason I play Tekken is because I can either outframe or outguess the other person. So, I love the new Guilty Gear games. I played fuck all of them. But so I do think that's an interesting element of, like,
or that's an element of Paratext that yeah, I don't think we'd covered yet is the fan fiction, fan art, fan narratives, engaging with something purely at like in video games, engaging with something as a as audience and not as player. You know, tons of people who are like, oh, I love Five Nights at Freddy. They have never bought Five Nights at Freddy. They have never played Five Nights at Freddy. They've just watched hundreds of streamers play Five Nights at Freddy because they love watching other people react to it.
This is closer
as an audience member.
This is closer to my wheelhouse, and so this is the thing where I wonder if this folds into. It definitely is part of the conversation, but if it could be considered paratext. Five Nights at Freddy's is a fascinating one because there's like a fucking music scene. There's a whole underground collective of people creating works based on those where you don't need to have experienced the games, and that a lot of people creating in that space don't play them.
Yeah.
And that's something that I find fascinating.
And that's both where like this definition of paratext becomes like, it becomes useful, but it then also starts to really break down because it's like, okay, this scene is clearly going far beyond the bounds of anything that is reasonably considered paratext of the original and is just becoming like subculture. And so at a certain point, like where in this spectrum do we need to like transition from talking about like paratext around Five Nights at Freddy to talking about a subculture, like a self-sustaining subculture that is talking amongst itself? You know, it's like that's kind of a guessing game. You know, there is no like distinct line in there, but clearly at a certain point it's like, all right, the Undertale community, Five Nights at Freddy community, like they are very clearly self-sustaining at this point. I mean, Super Eyepatch Wolf had a great video about how like the Undertale community has spread so far that you now have derivatives of derivatives of derivatives that have their own fandoms that are, you know, 1, 2, 3 degrees removed from Undertale itself, and it's like, okay, is it fair, like under the broad definition of paratext, is that derivative paratext of Undertale? Sure, that no longer feels useful. Sure, but that no longer feels like a useful definition. We probably need a new word at that point.
Not to be overly simplistic, but when I was discussing today's stream with my partner, the shorthand I said is that paratext can be used to convey a concept or to better understand a concept separate from the game. So yeah. I know I keep coming back to it, but to Leroy Jenkins is a term that we all understand that did not come from the text. It came from external elements, but it conveys something that we understand. Whereas, the evil version of Papyrus Fight that was one of the core fan bosses that got modded into Undertale. Yeah, that doesn't convey anything that you need for the space. It's an addition. It's an interpretive work. And if you want to get into interpretive works, fucking Valve and their legitimization of mods almost to the point of canonicalization.
Canonization.
No, that's the metric version. I was going for the imperial version.
We're dealing with right. Those are the European popes, not the.
Bingo. Now I love. I love talking about that, and like Slopsty was talking about like let's plays and streams. Like holy crud. That might have to be a topic for another day because I was chatting with a gentleman that made a game we were streaming yesterday, which was Control Alt Ego, an indie immersive sim with a kind of 90s British, almost like grunge Red Dwarf aesthetic.
Sure. And
my only critique of it was that it was engaging to the point where I found it difficult to convey through stream. So, if you ever want to talk about that, games as group theatre, games as performance, games as group experiential. But I think that's a separate conversation from paratext. Like, yeah, because someone brought up Maximilian Dude. And I would say that because of the size of that individual and his influence on the fighting game community, that to an extent his streams, or at least certain parts of his streams, could be considered. Even if I just want to shake him sometimes. It's not easy to just relicense Marvel vs. Capcom 2! Do you even know what you're saying?
Oh god,
Just do it, Capcom, he says, as if there's a little switch at Capcom HQ that's going to get them all of the Marvel licenses again.
You just go on your dashboard. You just go on your dashboard and resubscribe.
Killing me. He's killing me. Oh.
It's just re-up Capcom. Just resub.
It's fine. Although it is a lovely example of how far like the Marvel IPs have come since back in the day. Like that when Capcom used to be able to get all the Marvel IPs for fucking all.
Yeah, for like $30 and a ham sandwich.
Mm. And now any one of the main iconic characters is, I mean, shit, just getting the license to Wolverine, who I don't even know where he sits in who's.
Oh god.
Yeah.
I don't know if Marvel knows where he sits right now. They're like, look, we think we're reasonably confident we're still allowed to use him in our own comic books. Maybe. As no one has challenged us on that yet. So because they signed out. There was a period of time where Wolverine was like one of their few money makers, and so they just licensed him out to like everyone. And that means that there's a whole lot of people who are like, actually, we have the rights to Wolverine in this narrow, like we have the rights to Wolverine in third-person games that use fighting mechanics. So you can, if you've got a side scroller, then you're fine. Or if it's top down, like that's, that they get like these licensing agreements get like that weird and granular, because it's like, oh, if you constrain it, you can get a discount, but then that means that it ends up just like super fragmented.
Yeah, micro licensing is fascinating, but yeah. It just ends up being a great big mess. It's one of the problems that, especially Gundam as a franchise, hits, but that's another story. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm a little bit into the Gundams. But no, sorry, jumping back, because like I could talk licensing nonsense.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about the 90s business decisions of nearly bankrupt Marvel.
Well, but I guess it does. This is one of the tricky ones, is when the paratext is wrong. That is when it gets hard. Now, this might just be for me, as I'm basically a fucking daywalker right now, you know. I pay the rent by streaming, but I'm still very much involved in games industry stuff, you know. I'm still doing a whole bunch of things in that space, so I sit in this weird half in, half out. And sometimes it can be very tricky when individuals like Maximilian Dude, who have a big controlling part controlling part makes it sound like a diss. He's a huge part of the
tremendous amount of influence. Yeah,
in the narrative of, you know, the fighting game industry. And with things like the just re-release Marvel vs. Capcom 2, like the oversimplification of what that process is does then become truth.
Yeah. You then see it regularly repeated on Reddit of like, it's like, oh, they like, and it's not even somebody like citing Max, it's just somebody saying the same words.
Yes.
Because they may not even have heard it from him. They heard it from somebody else who was like repeating him, and it's like okay, how do we where did this information come from? Where did this idea come from? And how did it get entrenched in this community? And it's like, it turns out that this one, like that every now and then there is in fact an identifiable patient zero. For it's like, where did this bad idea come from? It's like, well, one dude went on stream and just kind of ran his mouth about an industry he doesn't know anything about. And it's like, how hard could it be? You just add an FOV slider, and it's like, that's not
Just click the add multiplayer button. It's dead easy.
Yeah.
And I understand, like, you know, discussions about misinformation and things like that are a much, much wider topic. But it's when areas like that become the go-to source end up being wrong, it can have a demonstrable negative effect on the people making the core thing, you know?
Yeah.
As a community manager, when someone puts out, like, false info, you can sometimes spend fucking years being like, no, it's not that, no. I don't want to say I'm still friends with. I'm still kind of like arm's length acquaintances with Bashiok, and just like the crap that he had to deal with because John would go on his podcast and just run his mouth about like how the community, like how the mods should behave, how the game should be tuned, and that whatever he said would just become like truth. That it's like, oh yeah, like badges of valor should be removed, and that just becomes truth, and you end up with, like, you know, at a certain point the devs drink that Kool-Aid too and convince themselves of it, and you end up with Cataclysm. God. You end up with the launch balance of Cataclysm, which, you know, that it's like you end up with the devs convincing themselves that this influencer is right, that it's like, oh yeah, if we make the dungeons just super hard, the community will pull itself up in order to rise to the challenge. You have no idea. See,
and
one of the peeps,
and then it was like it was Bashiok who needed to like deal with the fact that it's like, okay, no, the forums like immediately flooded with people who are like, hey, I went into this dungeon with like my dad and my kid brother, and we just got absolutely stonewalled, and to the point that like both of them quit. Like both of them just stopped playing. They didn't want to do it anymore, and now I don't have anyone to play with, and half of my guild isn't logging on for raid because we can't kill the first boss because it's just too hard. And suddenly the community managers are like, it's like, okay, well, you need to go and explain to these people that you need to go correct these players that they're playing wrong. You need to tell them that they need to adapt to the philosophy of the game. And he's sitting there like, our subscriber numbers are plummeting in real time.
I told Wheeler Dealer at the beginning of this stream that I was not going to start drinking before 6 today, and yet you seem determined to facilitate this. Because I don't know if it was Slopsology. Apologies, whoever put this forward. There's been a lot of good banter. But someone was saying about controlling like communication between players. No, controlling communications between the players and the devs. I wish, at naming no names, naming no studios, I could have banned the forums inside the studio, because what would happen is you get one person who'd be like, hepic. Unfortunately, I can't give any examples. And then
I read this thread.
and then the devs are coming to us.
They had some really good points.
And you're like, no, this guy's an asshole. And having to filter that through and trying to convey the concept of like the silent majority, trying to talk about like actual user experience and stuff like that. God, we had one individual who we're just going to call Wobbly Dave. And Wobbly Dave would always put forward the idea that the game was dumb and boring and it sucked until you got Wobbly Dave's mod. Wobbly Dave's mod fixed the AI, it fixed the combat, it fixed gore and violence. Good old Wobbly Dave. And Wobbly Dave would run his mouth about Wobbly Dave's mod. And then Wobbly Dave's mod would come out and everyone would be like, Wobbly Dave! Oh, fuck! Wobbly Dave, great mate, fucking love it. Huge threads. He changed absolutely nothing. He went into a little text file and he made a couple of changes. A couple of units would be more violent, a couple of units would be more aggressive. And he changed the dust particle effect to red to create an effect, to create a blood spray. Yeah. Again, not naming the name, but when it comes to big war games, you don't want to put too much gore in because it will get banned in Germany, and Germany fucking loves big war games. So, that's another story. But Wobbly Dave had everyone whipped up into such a frenzy in these long threads that the developers would be coming to the community team to tell them about like either, you know, Wobbly Dave's a genius, when can we get him in? We know he's an arsehole and he's full of shite.
You don't want to work with him, yeah.
Yeah, but then other devs coming in and being like, I can't believe you let Wobbly Dave in here. I can't believe you let Wobbly Dave say all these things. Oh, I do actually have gin in the house, so after stream, pour myself a big glass. Yeah, and that is the ballad of Wobbly Dave.
I mean, mods, boy, like mods just crack open. I mean, mods open such a whole new realm of dreams and nightmares.
Absolutely. One of my favorite games of the last few years is called The Hex. It is absolutely worth playing. If any of you haven't heard of The Hex, I'll give you the pitch. It is by the same person that did Pony Island and Inscription. It's actually a prequel to Inscription. And 6 video game protagonists meet at a bar. Someone calls and says there's going to be a murder. Go. But what I will say is that by the end of it, it has some of the most real conversations about how creatives feel, especially when it comes to like user interpretation, user review, and modifications. Like, it's the realest shit, and it does not look it. I wholeheartedly recommend it because, I mean, one, I'd love to get into this topic of mods. Maybe not today because that's a big
it's a lot.
But it's unique.
Oh boy,
it's unique to games as a medium. Like, you have fan cuts and fan reworks, but mods are just a
whole nother realm. Like fan recuts of films are so limited in a way that mods just like really aren't. Like, I've done some recuts, I've watched some recuts, and like the things that you're dealing with in it are very complex, and the skill floor needed to do a good recut is very high. And if you do a bad recut, then everyone just roasts you.
Yeah.
Where like the modding scene is just, it's completely different. One, they're far easier to like propagate. Two, they're normalized in a lot of ways. Three, like, not only are they normalized, they're like embraced in game identity. We talked about that in the video, you know, like there's whole but then they create like kind of their own problem, like basically that whole Wobbly Dave situation where it's like you get a game that it's like the biggest influencers for it popularize an idea that the game is not worth playing without mods.
Yes, you can,
and that
you
can
cannot play the game without
that
mods.
You cannot play the game without mods. Not that, like, you know, so City Skylines is actually like, I'm gonna point directly at City Skylines because it's been out long enough that it's gone through a whole arc with this. That there was a phase where like a couple community influencers who were very Wobbly Dave, kind of like got embedded in a, you know, they got embedded in a way where it became like conventional wisdom that if you were playing a stock install, you were like, what were you doing? Like, you noob, you idiot. Like, why are you wasting your time playing a stock install? And it took years and like active effort on not Paradox, like the actual developers of
It escapes my mind, but I know who you mean.
Colossal Order. It took like active effort on part of Colossal Order. You know, they hired a new community manager. She's really cool. Had her producing like more content and doing like mod highlights. And one of the specific things that they had her do, well, because they basically like they hired her out of the community. And one of the things that they have her do is like talk openly about mods in the game and show that like there isn't any kind of like hostility between mod makers and between mod makers and Colossal Order. It's a collaborative thing, and like playing with mods, playing without mods, like, you know, we're all on the same team here. In order to like counter this narrative that like that if you're not installing Traffic Manager, if you're not installing you know, the adjusted you know, like the death rate adjustment mods, if you're not installing realistic populations, if you're not installing rebalanced industries, you're bad at the game. Like, you know,
Please keep telling these lovely mother hubbards. I'll be back in just a second.
Sure.
The life of a dog dad.
You know, so they had to put in a lot of active effort to like reset that and adjust the way that the community postured itself relative to mods in order to counter these narratives. All right, chat, tell me some really convincing lies about about Will. Tell me some really, really deeply convincing lies about Will. What a monster. Never gives his guinea pig salad. I mean, that one is actually a really convincing lie, because I can, like...
I'm so sorry about that.
I have... Chat has informed me that that you never feed your guinea pig salad, and you don't, in fact, own a longboat.
I own a tiny longboat, and do not let this guinea pig propaganda... those little bastards are spoiled, and they will use any means. Also, once again, like, people are making so many great points in chat. It's one of the few downsides about having so many cool people in at once, is there's too much good banter going on. Because, like, Park Programs brought up the Grindhouse cut of Star Wars, which slaps. And God, I could spend a feckin' afternoon talking about that one. And I didn't want to go too hard into, like, CMs versus mod teams, because... One, a lot of the time, not to give Wobbly Dave a pass, but a lot of the time, the mods fix games narrative happens due to a lack of communications. Usually, community managers aren't given the tools to speak directly with the community, and so, like, this false concept grows until it becomes the narrative. You know. One of the things I can say is, like, you know, I worked at the Creative Assembly for a long time, and when we moved engine from, like, the old school engine to the fancier 3D one for, like, Empire, Napoleon, and onwards, there was an accusation that the team was anti-mods. Now, they weren't, because the game was just fucking much harder to make additions to, because, you know, fully 3D campaign map, you couldn't just, like, tippity-tappity and add a new, you know, faction or game mode or what have you.
Yeah. It's you've got games where it's like, oh well, the faction is just like every faction is based off of a spreadsheet template, and all you're doing is altering the RGB value on a flag, so you can duplicate factions in a second. And then it's like, okay, well, we move to an engine where every faction has like a whole list of bespoke models, and all of those models then have their, they then have all of the stuff that goes with that. They've got their MIP maps, they've got their texture files, they've got their normals and their UVs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, all right, just adding even one more unit is like a week of work.
Yeah. Now, there's a whole team of people at the studio doing all of that hard work, and like But because of the expectation between the titles, and because the studio wasn't at the time communicating properly, there became this narrative that no, the team hates mods, which they didn't. And it took a lot of work, primarily by my good friend Joey, setting up like a mod seminar where the teams could come in and show off. And let me tell you, that was fucking fun. And I know we're going way off the Paratext conversation, but fuck it. There was this young lad from Scotland who worked out how to mod in his own campaign map into Shogun 2, which the dev teams told me directly was impossible. And I think they ended up hiring him or something, but it's a fascinating give and take, but it did require a lot of effort to change that discussion. I guess it's easy for me to say as a community manager, like, you should have more direct conversation with your users. When you have something the size of World of Warcraft, that's not so easy.
Yeah. Well, because your users end up increasingly fragmented, and it's like, World of Warcraft ends up being fascinating because it supports a boutique industry of content creators. Like, it is big enough that a handful of people, Bellular, Taliesin, and Evitel, names, who make, like, whose job, they support themselves, they support their families by making content about World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And this is, in aggregate, a pretty big industry, but it's also like, it's very spread, margins are tiny, Taliesin and Evitel, like, they're doing okay, but like they're hardly, raking it in. The budgets for writers on Wowhead is like, like $100 an article, if that, and that creates a really sort of fascinating and interesting situation that I'm deeply empathetic in, because, like, okay, so like, Bellular's a really cool guy. Like, he's a pretty cool guy. Like, just like on a personal level, he's a pretty, just like, he's a dude. But at the same time, but his channel is in this precarious position where his income, his word that means the thing that you do for a living, is contingent on, like, the success of this other thing, that he is just producing a paratext intrinsically linked with this other thing, not just in a broader way. So in the way that, like, it's like, okay, I produce a video about Annihilation 2 years after the movie comes out. It is paratext for Annihilation, but, like, if Annihilation, like, I am in no way beholden to, like, Annihilation still being popular a year later.
You also don't have to worry about Annihilation 2 Electric Boogaloo, the all-musical gun shootout version with Dwayne The Rock Johnson coming out.
Yeah, the main thing that I would need to worry about there is that it's like, people are going to expect me to, like, respond to it. Like, it's like, okay, people are really going to want to know, like, what I have to say about it. And I can choose, like, and then I can choose to react to that or not. But so we have, like, these, like, so Bellular is in this position of being, like, he's producing Paratext. He is a para industry. And that sounds a little bit too close to parasite for my well-being. I don't want to, like, coin that term, but, like, he is a para industry. He makes his channel in its almost entirety is paratext on World of Warcraft and is tied to the ongoing success of World of Warcraft. And that creates really interesting and complex and often difficult incentives and interactions in our capitalist hellscape, where then the the relationship between channel owners and the relationship between channel operators, the video game that they talk about, and like YouTube is in this extremely tenuous dance, and the margins for the individual content creator are very like thin and narrow and tenuous. You look at the the videos that I produce are what's called like long tail. So I make videos that, like, for the most part, if you watch them a week later, a month later, a year later, 5 years later, they resonate pretty much just the same. My 50 Shades of Grey triplet has been out for years now. And people still they watch it, they respond to it, they comment on it. It's getting.
You don't have to react to, say, a 50 Shades of Grey patch that's been released, that there's an expectation that you'll be the authority. But then you've got this whole industry that does need to do that, because they don't their videos are immediate, and it's basically news. It's like it's worthless tomorrow. Yes.
You get 99.n views in your first week, and then that's functionally it. If somebody rewatches one of your videos 2 years from now, that's either because they're A, doing research, or B, got lost. And that's so there's a relationship between Paratext and industry and capitalism that I think is a underdeveloped area of analysis, and looking I don't think anybody's really dug into it in a way that is
okay,
digestible to a mainstream audience. Because I know there's research and academics who have written about these exchanges and these incentives and the relationship between all of these things, but I don't think there's
Well, this is fascinating, because this is something I do know a fair bit about. One of the main reasons that people don't want to talk about it is that no one really wants it to go away. It's one of the few situations, aside from some situations, where it turns toxic.
I just want to get one word, because it's I think there's a hesitancy of talking about it, because there's this deep fear that if you name the monster, you will kill everything around it. Yes. That if we talk about Bellular's channel as a business, we will accidentally destroy it.
Yes. One of the things that I was responsible for at the Creative Assembly was outreach. Before we had influencer managers, before we really understood the weight of it, I was given that as an offhand side task. And, my job was to coordinate the people making Let's Plays and YouTube videos and patch note videos and stuff. Make sure they had builds, they had what they needed. No one was stepping on anybody's toes and things like that. And my mate Lionheart, he's got Sproglet, they bought a house. His day-to-day job is reliant on producing YouTube videos and streams around not just the projects that I was working on, but things within that space. And the other side of the quiet is that it seems to be more common now for people who come from a content creation or streaming background being hired and brought into those spaces, rather than what was happening prior, which was industry people like myself reaching out. So there's a definite want to keep those relationships not out of the public eye, but keep them unobserved, lest it change the landscape. Because from a game developer perspective, it's one of the beautiful things that we have, and it's not parasitic, it's symbiotic. Now, World of Warcraft is now massive and huge, but that's less the example and more like one of the outlying cases. If Punch a Skeleton in the Gob 2 is coming out, and I have a group of skeleton punching fans that are putting out videos based on every patch notes that are being dropped or the news that's being disseminated, holy shit, that's more content that I could produce in-house by an order of magnitude, and they then have their communities, and then that spreads out, and it's all pulling back towards the title. Like, fuck, that's great. Like, if we take like the paratext, the nonsense out of there, that's a thing that video game companies absolutely want to continue.
Yeah.
But the fear is that if the light is shined on it, if it's named, that the shift there is going to be very quick and will remove control from both and potentially put it into the hands of a more capitalistic third party. It won't be our mate. I was almost going to say Dave again, but don't talk to Wobbly Dave after the incident. Our mate Tim down the road, who makes videos on our skeleton punching thing, like that, it might be taken away from him and dropped into the space of, I don't know, larger entities.
Yeah, I mean, it's what happened to wikis, really.
Yes.
Is that they all got taken over by, you know, the same company, because there was there was effectively just sort of a moment where it was like, oh, it turns out that like a whole bunch of the most popular wikis are actually just run by like the same guys. And once that curtain was pulled back, it was like, okay, well, like the value of all wikis, basically the value of all video game wikis was basically like mashed into the same homogenous slurry overnight. And so it made perfect sense that like, okay, well, all wikis should just be on this same standardized template. They should all be owned by the same company, and like, and that's fine and cool. And that's like, you know, and it wasn't until suddenly every video game wiki sucks and they're all bad now, that people start going like, oh, maybe it was a bad idea to let them all be bought by the same guy. And the same, and like the thing could easily happen in like these talk about video game spaces, these paratext industries, these symbiotic paratext industries, where you shine a light on it, and then oops, accidentally the message that gets out is, oh right, all of this paratext industry is just free advertising for the host body. It really doesn't matter who makes it, because it's all the same stuff. And it dies and is replaced by something far more corporate.
Yeah. One thing that was fascinating as a small aside is bringing those elements in-house can cut a lot of people's income out. I believe the Hitman franchise had taken a lot of their guides and brought them to like I don't know what, I'd have to double check this one, so I don't want to equate it as fact, but by my understanding, when I was looking up how to do a few things for getting ready for the new Hitman content that's coming up, and I was googling like, how do I throw this person in a pile of slurry, and the one that was coming up first seemed to be an IO Interactive series of like how-tos. Which, and I guess we're getting more into like guides and guide writing at that point, which is like, oh boy. Yeah.
I mean, that stuff's already dead. Like for all, like, yeah, like that got the days of game facts and your ASCII art gilded, you know, your illuminated your manuscripts of your manuscript.txt illuminated with ASCII art.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. It's being completely and wholly replaced with pcgamer.wiki wiki.pcgamer article written by some dude hired off of Fiverr who themselves was cribbing from fandom.com. And it's like, and it's a nightmare and it sucks. And so I think there's a very real fear of, it's like, okay, like we've got these independent creators who have somehow managed to carve out these tiny niches of generating paratext, and all right, now don't
nobody breathe.
Don't breathe on it. Nobody breathe, or it might collapse, because like all of the independent charm that that makes it good is fragile. And really the message here is fix capitalism, so that people can just make stuff.
Yeah, but until my fix capitalism button shows up in the mail, which I did order it.
You did, or I mean, just how hard could it be? You just go in the code.
They closed my PO box, so it's in a package somewhere. I've still got to get it. But one thing that we have observed is that the one thing that at least this kind of like, we'll call it the Paratext industry, though Moose called it the House of Paracards, and I will be having a word with Moose later. That it's got to be genuine to an extent. There's one thing that users can smell, and that is if it is not genuine, if it is that kind of created, generated setup, users can smell it a mile off. That's one thing that I have observed, and that hasn't changed. You see it when the attempted multi-channel networks back in the day, like Machinima and stuff, where they would hire a lot of very funny, talented people to produce, content on the machine, and the viewership would just go down because they could smell a mile off that it was just being produced as this setup. So I think the Paratext industry is going to have a level of genuine. It's got to have a level of genuine, and I think that will keep it going. I don't think there's as much to fear of shining the light on it. But I can understand why. I mean, like I said, I'm half in, half out right now. The other thing is that this is going to be very mean. Not to anyone here, but this is mean. Influencer agencies mostly suck.
Yes. I don't think that's a very uncontroversial.
I know, but it's the reason why it's mean is because they operate with a level of obfuscation, much like an ad agency. So if you're not sure what I mean, it's like, so as I said, we're releasing our Punch a Skeleton in the Face 2 game coming out this year. We want streamers and YouTubers and people to talk about it and play it. So we go to an influencer agency and they say, well, boy, have we got a deal for you. Give us this bag of money and we'll give it to our top influencers. And so we get out our sack of money, we pass it over, and they give us back a report on how many eyeballs saw it, how many impressions, how many click-throughs, yada yada. But what actually happens from that is a complete obfuscation. They might get 50 medium-sized streamers to play it, and they all have a great time, and that generates genuine buzz. They might pay two of their top people to talk about it for 2 seconds and then never mention it again.
You want to know, you want me to just straight up tell you, what it looks like how that sausage is made?
Hey, mate,
because I've been on the...
we've got nowhere else to be today. Let's do this.
All right, so Maker, rest in piss. When I was with them, they still owe me $400. Maker, what they would do is they would get the sack of money, right?
Yeah.
And then they would go and just put a posting on their internal board. They'd put a posting on the app and be like, yo, hey, we've got question mark amount of money. We're not going to tell you what the terms of our deal was. We've got X slots for this thing. Here's a bunch of boilerplate, first come, first serve.
So their approach, Maker's approach to working with content creators was the same as emailing donuts in the break room, first come, first serve.
Yeah. And keeping in mind also that Maker went on, they had just this massive irrational sign up spree. So what they're doing, so the big thing that's happening here, and not all influencer agencies are exactly the same, but a lot more of them are in the Maker. I mean, they're not exactly the same. Things have changed a bit in recent years, mostly because most of these MCNs have died, because people on all sides of the deal started to realize like, hey, wait, the actual value proposition here is like really bad, and everyone's getting screwed except for the guys at Maker. Is that they had onboarded just a tremendous number of people, and so they just dump it on the dashboard of like, hey, 50 slots to advertise, Raid Shadow Legends, and they're all at the same rate. It's basically first come first serve. So you as the influencer package buyer are having you're paying somebody a lot of money to do this advertising for you, and then they're effectively just like throwing it out to like whoever. And on one hand, sure, that's a way for a dude with 500 subscribers to get an ad deal and get paid. And for a lot of the people who are taking these deals, like for a lot of the companies who are agreeing to let Maker do this to them, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for them. Like they should know better. They should have picked up on it a lot sooner. But it's still not a fair deal. Like, sure, dude with 500 subs gets a brand deal, does his Raid Shadow Legends read, gets 300 views on a sponsored video, and it doesn't make one lick of sense.
No.
It's completely incoherent as a business decision that anyone would make. But like, I mean, good on whoever got a bag. Like, I'm never gonna criticize somebody for getting a bag when they've got the opportunity. But it's like, if you're if you're Raid Shadow Legends and you're a bad game that's pumping out just an irrational amount of money into influencer marketing, like, sure, you get what you deserve. But it's really easy for like a mid-level game, like the so-called like double A indie games, to get tricked by a salesperson at Maker into believing that like this is in fact like a good way of doing things, because like influencer marketing works.
This is how all the big games do it.
This is how all the big games do. Yeah, exactly. And so they end up dumping a big amount of their thing in, like a big amount of their marketing budget into this, influencer deal. But then the agency treats that deal with absolutely no respect, and is just like, hey, literally whoever, we do not care if your channel is like, we don't care if your channel is even gaming relevant. We don't care, like, we care nothing about like what your actual channel is, what your viewers are, like whether or not you're an audience that aligns with this brand. First come, first serve.
Let's go, baby. Also, Kestrel, I will finger guns when it is relevant, but I cannot hold a candle to the hitbox master himself.
So
I guess at this point we're just
Scottish. Oh frick.
Okay, baby boy.
You know that the
It's
Scottish
like
Lord or
that
Lady
fucking-
title.
Sorry, my partner's trying to wrangle a dog because he's got to have his feeties cleaned, and it's kind of like that video of the kids like bundling in the back of an interview. It's great. No, we will not free Amos. No hashtag free Amos. But no, what I wanted to add is I was on the other side of the Maker stuff, and I got to see the 3 stages of Maker, like the initial idealistic. I'm still fucking livid at one of my brand managers who blocked 2 very well-known creators doing an Iron Man run as a promotion. And like, I sat down with a person, they had a pitch for me, I was like, this is great. I'm sure Uncle Sonic would have been down for it, but no, brand manager person didn't want to do it. But then I got to see like the Maker shift into its like its second and third stages, and oh boy. But these days, streaming is now known. Like, I don't need to tell you, Dan, but to those watching, like, in video game marketing, everybody understands the power of live streams. And again, it's another symbiotic relationship, but it's very time consuming. Like, the blueprints for successful Twitch marketing is out there. The peeps who did Dead Cells literally wrote down everything they did. You can just follow it, but it's time consuming, and time is
Yeah.
money. It's real easy to just be like, oh, well, I'll just hire an agency to do it for me. It's a different thing. It's a different thing. But
Yeah, I think there's no tidy and easy lessons there. It's complicated. We've wandered so far off into, now we're just talking about like industry. We're talking about creator industry stuff. We're talking about the gig economy where but I mean, obviously it's a subject that we're both quite passionate about.
yeah, and you see a very different side of it than I do. Like, so it's always fascinating to talk, especially to anybody for like whom like YouTube is like the primary platform, because I have professionally made videos for YouTube, but I've never been someone reliant on it. Whereas I'm entirely reliant on Twitch. These lovely mother hubbards keep me alive. So it's a fascinating thing to get into the guts of. But what we could do is to potentially take us from our strange off-road cabin back to the town of Paratext. Do you want to open the pit up to some questions? Because these peeps have been having brilliant conversations alongside.
Yeah,
us.
sure. Yeah. Let's do
so
it.
just friends, if you just at Viking Blonde in chat so I can see him quicker, and we'll go from there. Yeah, Paratown. There we go. Although Earthman Dave does say that the people demand more Dave, and Earthman Dave is not related to Wobbly Dave. Those are two separate Daves.
Putting on the shutter shades because the lines, they're parallel.
Robin's asking, why don't I also have shutter shades? I don't make that shutter shade money. As the good value select tells us, make money.
You gotta be on YouTube to afford $5 shutter shades. Twitch, these Twitch pours.
I've probably got the Twitch shades they give away at every meet, like somewhere.
Oh, I've got so many. I have like a bag full of them upstairs.
The local Seattle meet is really good, and they always have a ton of the merch. But over the years, like, I've just developed this hoard of plastic Twitch sunglasses.
Yeah, I mean their hat, their snapback is really good. It's a really good hat. Their socks are also really good. The shades are cheap crap.
They stopped doing the socks for us. Although I did have a sad realization as we went into lockdown that I was entirely reliant on GDC for new socks every year. And that all my socks were like Unreal, Fat Shark, fucking Unity branded socks. Before we went lockdown.
What's this Wii stuff? You still have the same socks. Nothing's changed.
But there are other socks involved now. I'm getting right out.
That were sent to you by the Longship.
Details.
I just want to.
Someone signed you up for Hank's Sock Club.
Actually, no one signed me up for Hank's Sock Club. Oh.
All right, Longship. There's your task for the year. Get this man a Hank's Sock Club.
So Rainier, I don't want to restate what Paratext is, but I do recommend the video that started this whole conversation. The reason why I reached out to Dan to join us. Dan did a video called "It's Rude to Suck at World of Warcraft," which is brilliant for, understanding the evolution of a game like that, the social effects of like long-term improvement to a title, and also introducing like Paratext.
One of the funniest things about the response to the video has been people in some other MMO communities that shall go undirectly named, just being like, it's like watching it and being like, it's like, oh well, I'm so glad I play this other game that doesn't have this same relationship to Paratext and instrumental gameplay. It's like, nah, you missed the point. It's all like this. It's all like that. Like
What do you mean? It's
this is just what people. This is just what people do. This is just what people do, and it's like if you jumped ship from WoW to Final Fantasy 14, and you're like, oh, I don't need to deal with like toxic raiders anymore. That's not because of Final Fantasy 14. That's because you jumped to a different game to get away from it and stayed away from it. You changed what track you were on. It's not that it doesn't exist in the new place.
Yes, it's not that you got rid of country music. You just moved out of a country music.
You just moved out of country music town. Yeah. One of the my favorite thing to see in the replies is all of the people talking about like ways that they saw instrumentality like take root and like get its hooks into like MMOs or game communities that are just like the most casual thing imaginable. You know, it's like, yeah, I was playing Mickey's Toontown and like, and it became like meta that you had to have like this loadout in order to clear through this level like as fast as possible. And it's like, yeah, this happens everywhere.
I see you two have played Skylanders.
Yeah, exactly. That it's like, no, you didn't like your chosen MMO doesn't magically avoid this. It's just the circles that you move in. You've managed to escape like the immediate gravity well of it.
So, Lance, the difference between Paratext and meta is the meta of a game is when you boil it down to purely its mechanics, what is the optimal maneuver? Users can argue about the meta, but there is always a meta. The paratext is where that comes in or is discussed, or
is where that is discussed. So paratext, like the literal breakdown of it, is text that is in parallel to the primary text, so that runs alongside it.
The other thing that, I mean, maybe not today, so I don't like trap you on a call for like 5 hours, but one of these days, let me tell you about the Blackout Club, where paratext is not only expected, but was where the story was constructed. Like, what if, one of these days I will sit down. I got my Blackout Club tattoo from it. Like, I'm not even joking.
So paratext, like the easiest, like the cleanest example of it is just that it's like, okay, you have World of Warcraft. It's got all of its official communication channels. And you've got the game itself, and then you have like Wowhead, which collate, like they collate all of the official communications. They also write a whole bunch of commentary about it. They write strategy guides. They break down mechanics. They have a giant database of like where to find every item in the game. But that is not an official thing. Like, and it exists in parallel to the game, and you can play World of Warcraft without ever knowing that Wowhead exists. But at some point, you're going to be like, hey, how do I find this thing? And someone is going to tell you, just go look it up on Wowhead.
Yeah, and at that point, one of the things I've been using as a shorthand is like, does paratext reframe how you see the original? Like, once you see Wowhead and you start learning about like best in slot and, you know, item tier listings and ideal builds and stuff like that, you can't unlearn that. You can't unring that bell.
Yeah, you can't forget that you are aware of the fact that an ideal build exists, and it will forever be in the back of your head, and it'll follow you into other video games. You'll start a new MMO, and at some point you're gonna pause. You're gonna be presented a choice, and you're gonna pause and go like, well, I wonder which one does more damage. Now, because you're aware that that's a possibility.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, so Rainier brought on EVE Online, and EVE Online is an example of where all the information is presented to you within the title, so there's very little need for paratext. There are a couple of things, but those are usually group specific. Everything else is kind of communicated within the title. And yes, EVE Online is incredibly toxic, and it is full of... toxic is such a difficult word to contextualize these days. It's hostile. EVE Online is actively hostile, but that is part of the experience. Thing is, EVE Online
you join kick each other in the Ghiblies club because, you know, sure, you want to kick other people in the Ghiblies, but you have opened yourself to the possibility that you will in turn take one in the Ghiblies.
Yes. Eve also has a system where you can basically get a Ghibli kicking teacher early on. Like, people will volunteer to literally be like little, to usher people through the early bits of the game and take them through how it's going to be, you know, the pitfalls, the traps, the interactions. And those are users, not developers. So their language is the same as the other people playing. So like, that's a whole thing.
Get onboarded into the that word that I just forgot.
Yep.
Get onboarded into the jargon.
Yep. Now, I mean, again, if we had 1,000 hours, I'd tell you all about like subversion of play, where we actively tried to create a group in EVE Online that fought against that like specific manner of playing. We created a comedy group called the Burp and Crabattle Detective Agency, and we solved space crimes across EVE Online.
Nice.
But that's another story. God damn it. Kestrel just coined Studio Ghibli bits, and that's going to be stuck in my head forever. Thanks, Kestrel. If you're proud of yourself. If you've got any other questions, thoughts, or feels, like throw them in. And again, don't be afraid to put @VikingBlonde there so it's easier to see. It is interesting how, when it comes to Paratext in games, it is a lot of the live service titles, or at least live service development titles, that seem to breed it more than anything. It's the fact that the very thing you're observing is in a state of flux, so it creates that need for an external information.
Like, I mean, it not only it creates the need for external information, like in the very direct sense of like, hey, Fortnite has done a major map update. Maybe you want somebody to kind of give you a tour of like the what's what before you jump into your first game, just so that you aren't going in. You're not going to get just like completely rocked the moment that you land out of the bus. And or maybe like a lot of things like with Fortnite, it's like, okay, new season, what weapons even drop, what vehicles are going to be available, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, because the game is in a constant state of flux, there's a need for a constantly updating stream of information about the game that players desire, because like time is valuable and not everyone wants to spend a season wants to spend their first like 3 days of playing a new season of Fortnite exploring the map and hoping that they can get enough of a grasp of it before getting headshot from 500 meters away.
Especially when you add the idea of season passes and like experience through play.
Where it's like you're on a track where your rewards are contingent on performance. And like, not just your rewards, the value of your purchase, the value of your battle pass purchase is ultimately contingent on your ability to complete it, because obviously you paid for the whole thing, and if you don't finish the track, you then paid for stuff you didn't get.
Yep. It's a web situation.
Yeah, and so there's this huge incentive, there's this huge performance grounded incentive to do well right out of the hop and be taking advantage of that, and that creates incentive for people to seek out information about the game state before they even engage with it. Which then supports this which then supports the existence of channels who do nothing but collate that data.
Yeah. So Lance gives us an interesting question. Mainly interesting because if we don't go for the obvious answers, it's a fun one. Which is, in what ways do you think that the paratext around games has actually improved the image outside of reviews? Now, we've talked at great length about Bloodborne, and
I have two perfect examples. You keep going.
I am absolutely going to say, you know what? No, it's too good to leave off the table. Minecraft. Minecraft is a title built entirely from the external info. From day one, where you had to Google how to make stuff, to other people contextualizing play and shaping the way in which people saw the game. Like, feckin' yo.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one is going to be Jurassic Park Trespasser, which has been dramatically improved in its perception
I knew we
and
were friends for a
value
reason. I knew.
based entirely on the Let's Play, the YouTube Let's Play series posted by Survey Says.
'Cause-
His Let's Play series single-handedly improved the broader perception of Jurassic Park Trespasser far beyond the reviews would indicate, which approached it purely as a game experience, in which case it is in fact bad.
Yeah. We've talked about Trespasser here a lot because, you know, you can't talk about like either immersive sims or diegetic UI without bringing it up.
Yeah.
But you're right, like that's the one that recontextualized it for so many people, other than as a tiny footnote of there was a Jurassic Park game, Spielberg was involved, and it was bad. You had to look at your own boobies.
The other one for would be 50 Cent, Blood on the Sand. This game is not good, but this game is amazing, and reviews of it are very like rightly accurate that it is not a good game, but Let's Plays of it are amazing, and watching somebody stream it is amazing and is hella fun. Amy 2012, awful game. My speed run of it, I single-handedly improved the perception of that game by doing a speed run of it on SGDQ.
See, I was also going to bring in like the speedrunning elements. Both Pepsi Man and Sneaking, both arguably awful games designed to sell, you know, consumables that have been recontextualized. Pepsi Man is now, by the way, getting a physical copy of Pepsi Man is
impossible. They're like $1,000.
Yeah, completely recontextualized. And Sneaking is talked about with a humorous reverence that it absolutely was not when it came out. Oh boy. Okay, have you got any more questions for our good selves, for Dan?
Yeah, I gotta get started on dinner here soon.
Yeah.
One more really good question, and
One
then
more meaty
I'm
question.
gonna go.
But I mean, Dan, this has been feckin' grand, and if it's all right with you, I might bug you about grabbing you for some more banter, because
Absolutely, yeah.
We carved a path of tiny towns of conversation today that I would like to explore with supplies and planning. You know what? And just as a last on that previous point, Desert Bus is a great example.
Yeah. Seems like NFT games are entirely Paratext, but seems like people are going. Yeah, which seems. I mean, yes, I would agree that given that I'm currently working on a video about a game heavily tied to NFTs, like I would absolutely agree that they are. It's a genre that exists all the time. No.
Is it metalcore? Because I've got
no, it's
fucking beef with
Decentraland. It's Decentraland.
Oh.
But like that these are games that exist almost entirely as Paratext. Like I posted to Twitter a couple days ago about like, I mean, metaverse as a whole is kind of this thing where, so like Lindt, you know, the terrible chocolate company Lindt, they make the little, like utterly saccharine chocolate truffles that have just an awful texture. They did a metaverse shop, and it's terrible. It's so awful. It looks like immediately the thing that like I posted it, and the two things that were most often compared to were Return to Zork and Microsoft Bob.
Okay, you can't compare.
Like it looks like a 90s FMV game.
Now I want to play it.
Well, but this is the thing. So this is like, that's perfectly fine if you're positioning this as like a retro throwback thing, right?
Yeah, checks
it's a little bad if you're putting it next to like a bunch of body copy about how it's an innovative and an innovative and future facing business solution. Shot like a new shopping experience. It's like, yeah. But the thing is that it took me actually like a bunch of work to track it down, because it largely just existed as a series of press releases about its existence. it was almost entirely Paratext. And to the degree that there's a lot of things out there now that the Paratext is the product. That it's like, okay, we're going to do a thing, but we're going to do it just enough that we can issue a press release, and then people will talk about the press release, and we have no intention of them ever engaging with the primary text.
God. When it comes to that whole sphere, like we've got a couple more months of having to put up with metaverse bollocks, because GDC's falling this side of the fiscal year, and so due to Dan, I don't know if you got to do GDC No, you didn't get to do GDC last year.
I've not done. I've actually never attended GDC in person.
No, okay. When you feel comfortable going, one, you should, and I'd love to show you this strange, wonderful land. But two, like last year was all like metaverse companies, NFT companies, but selling nothing. They were selling the interconnectivity to a product that doesn't exist. And it's all due to speculative investment stuff, where I don't even think at this point there's any expectation that they should exist. It's like
it's a land sale in a game, like it's a land sale for a product, for virtual land in a product that's still like 3-4 years away. Yeah,
well, that's the thing.
And then when the product does launch, it's awful. Yeah.
But what was fascinating about it was that the term metaverse is thrown around as if it's a thing that is going to happen. But there are multiple competing products claiming to be. None of them have either the scope, scale, or infrastructure to actually do it. And if any of them were close to being able to deliver, they would absolutely never, ever use any third-party stuff. Because if you make the metaverse, you win. You are Ready Player One. Every transaction goes through you. You are what Valve could only dream of becoming. You are the superpower. Why the fuck would you give that money away to, I don't know, two blokes in a shed over there who are like, we'll make it so when you sell your metaverse stuff, it smells like strawberries. Why are we giving the strawberry guys money, Dan? Why are we giving them money? We're not. It's bad evil.
Well, and it's like, I mean, the big thing is that most of them just fail to confront the sort of fundamental question of like, is this ludic interface any good? Is shopping in a virtual store good?
And it's
because the answer is generally like no, because a two-dimensional website where things can have an arbitrary relationship that is unbounded by volume, where you can just take your product and represent it in its best light with a still photograph that shows it from its best angle under controlled lighting. It turns out that that's like really useful. And for both you as the seller and for your buyer, who, because like, you know, on a flat screen you can pack in a lot of text that's very easy to read in a way that like once you put it into a 3D space, it just gets like more difficult to actually like interact with, because now you're suddenly worried about perspective. And it's like, no, we flat websites exist the way they do for a reason.
I mean, pitch the scene. Someone is going to your store to buy your product, but because their hardware sucks or their internet sucks, they see a low quality res that doesn't quite load and doesn't quite function, and they go, no.
Well, and one of the guys that I spent the last 2 weeks reading is just like, and that's why we'll solve all of these problems. We will solve the problem. We will build a super powerful, like we will fix the problems of latency in hardware because otherwise the metaverse won't exist.
Sure you will, mate. Sure you will.
Sure you will.
Yeah. We'll just fix the speed of light problem. That's how we'll
fix the speed of light problem. But more than that, it's like companies, like all of the intermediate stakeholders, all of the ISPs, all of the cable owners, all of the everyone who's in between on that hardware chain, they're all going to just like altruistically stop trying to maximize their profits. They're going to accept lower profits purely because otherwise the metaverse experience would be bad, and then the metaverse wouldn't exist. They're going to take a lower profit margin so that the metaverse can exist.
And that's the thing that we know from ISPs. It's their altruistic nature.
They just love running, like they love running just barely, like, you know, it's like a little bit of profit, as a treat. But yeah, also, they really love just being as close to break even as possible.
I guess we kind of cracked into a topic that I love wailing on because it's just it's people with too much money being very dumb. But one of the things that we know from human history is that humans want the least amount of steps between like the want and the acquisition. You know, be it like immediate necessities like, you know, food and water, or be it, you know, like, you know, emotional or intellectual things, you know, books, tools, art supplies, what have you. The optimal experience for a person is the least amount of friction between like idea and acquisition. Like Amazon rocks face because, you know what you can do? You can go, oh, I want to get some more paints for my Gundam. It's
even deeper than that. I don't want to open a web browser, type in amazon.co.uk, hit enter, and then go into the search function. I want to open a web browser and just type in thing I'm looking for, and then click one button and be taken to the product page for whatever the most popular and thus air quote trustable source of that thing is.
And the thing is, I mean, I'm obsessed with video games, as I'm sure is evident. But like, there are some games where the amount of loading time and or the amount of interaction required by me to get from zero to gameplay is more than my little brain can handle that night. I love Darktide, but Darktide has these really stodgy loading times at the moment because it's doing so well. And there's some evenings where I just, even though all the gameplay is like, you know, smash heretics, the amount of time between like intent and play is so lengthy that I just go, and then you're going to ask me to do that so I can buy some fucking eggs.
I have absolutely decided to play a different game because I got about halfway through a 2-minute load and was just like, nope, something else.
Yep.
Something that loads faster. And then of course but like the impulse then happens, and of course it takes you longer to like force quit a game that's in the middle of loading and load another game than it would have taken to just wait for it to
which leaves the user with a negative experience and can be off-putting in returning to play. So okay, I think this is a really good time to bring our banter to a close.
Yes.
Again, if you have time in the future, Dan, I'll let be about coming back, mate, because I feel
absolutely.
Like if it wasn't for the limitations of the human body, we probably could have kept going for another few fucking hours.
Yeah, I gotta eat. I gotta feed my flesh prison, or it will die, and then I die. It turns out if you die in real life, you die.
What? Oh, piss. But if you die in the metaverse, no one notices.
You're fine. Yeah, it turns out you're fine. It turns out that it's just a game. And
so let me do me plugs and me promos for you. At this point, friends, I assume most of you have seen Dan's work, but if not, so please follow Dan on twitch.television. Have a look over at the Folding Ideas channel over on YouTube. If you didn't get the chance to watch the World of Warcraft video, give that a watch. Also, the Fortnite video is probably essential working for anybody in any like online titles. Like, there's a whole bunch of really good stuff to churn into. And like, honestly, like, mate, you've been my source for quite a few of the really meaty videos you've got in. So, you know, thank you for the cool works that you do.
Thank you.
Lance, I might have to get that as a t-shirt that says "Bury me with my Ethereum." I'm trying to decide that if I do go to
print them all out, print out the hashes on some dot matrix. I want to make sure it's still got the don't rip them apart, just a full stack.
I'm trying to decide what t-shirts I need to get if I do GDC this year, and that might have to be on the list. That I killed NFTs, and Denny's is just Waffle House for people that can't fight. So yeah, Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a good time to chat.
Okay, so I'm going to roll credits and thank these lovely Mother Hubbards. So yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening, mate, and to be continued.
Take care.
Okay. Hey, I'm back the right side up. But yes, thank you once again, Dan, for being a fucking great guest. To all of you who have joined us here today, if you've enjoyed this kind of banter and this kind of nonsense, this is what I love talking about. I know we didn't get to a lot of your points and your comments and things for everybody hanging out in chat, but there's enough banter to unpack for like the next 1,000 years. Now, tomorrow we are playing Sea of Thieves, so I'll have Kyle and Ems and Fiona, but I'll have some other industry friendos so we can banter some stuff back and forth. Park programs. Blockchain is how I kept my wallet from getting stolen. Love it. I guess it was a teeny tiny little podcast. But and Earthman Dave, and seriously, like Jefferson Bloss, you know what? Let me do the credits part so I can actually say some proper thank yous rather than being a complete nonsense merchant. Where's me? Yes, I'm still watching these. Absolute nonsense. But no, all of you that have thrown in some follows, like, thank you so much. Right. And to that end, I would like to say thank you to the following Mother Hubbards who have followed and thrown bits and otherwise. Though you can't see my face right now, because I guess I fecked it up. Nah, like I said, friends, I met Dan like back in 2018, and no sneak bits.
Sneak bits.
No sneak bits. I'm trying to be a professional. There's new people here. They think I might be cool. Don't give it away. So to Fearless Sun, Quasimoto, Some Numbers, Thrame, Compliment Cat, Wolfcrad, and Naruhoodie, thank you for the bits, friends. Like, you all blew the doors off yesterday, you fucking legends. To Caffeine and Rhymes and Moose, thank you kindly for being the best mods I could ask for. To Martin Dogman, Earthman Dave, who's not Wobbly Dave. Stop it!
More sneak bits, you
No!
say?
Jefferson Bloom, Slopsody, Lysandra Med, Critical Event, Rain Dog, and Miguel. Thank you all for following. I really do hope we get to chat and hang out some more. To Wet Paint Gaming, Ms. Liz the Wiz, Malakat Scardi, Ludo History, Mr. Hoffman and Foldable Human, that being Dan. Whether you were gifted subs or otherwise, thank you. And Caffeine and Stooge, thank you so much for bringing those raids in. Like, I'm sorry I wasn't able to truly celebrate them. Are we just doing a trade now?
Have overcome the Arc Villain Shredder.
I'm trying to be a professional! Trying to be a professional here. No, Bacon, Stooge, Erriman, Puns, Bacon again, Erriman again, Greyjoy, and Stooge again. All of you, thank you. For those of you that are new here, like, I wasn't joking. This whole corner of the internet is pretty much entirely funded by people throwing in donations and gift subs, and like bits are still the big thing. So, like, to all of you, fucking thank you. Oh, Artie Poe says you weren't allowed to break me while Dan was here. Did Lizzie tell you that? I'll have to say, I'll have to give Lizzie a raise. Wait a sec. I do not value my mods nearly enough. I am bad people. Oh no. Kestrel, thank you for filling the pint glass. God, this was fucking glorious.
And Jarl Snipe.
Yes, and Jarl Snipe, except for Gilmar Greyjoy got it, so... you all unseated our guest after they left. Terrors, the lot of you. So, Agananiki, I had a look for what you were talking about, but that just seems to be orcs in Pathfinder, so you'll have to explain that to me another time, friend.
Sneak train.
I have no control over you all. I have no control over you all. No, you know what? Feck it. Let's get some of the 2 mellow going. This is this current soundtrack is too calm banter. I want a bit more pep in the step. There we go. God, I will say today's banter did make me miss World of Warcraft, and honestly, if there was region transfer, I probably would have cracked. Well, so you friends, you have me for as long as the train continues. For as long as the train continues. So, I'll start seeing who we can leap on over to next. Once again, there are too many good people streaming all at once. Ain't that the feckin' curse, right? Oh yeah, Ereman, you're right, my gear score's not high enough. Wait, my gear score's not high enough to stop the train? Or my gear score's not high enough to transfer between regions? God. But no, what a feckin' great day. You know, I'm not surprised this was great banter, but I'm very happy that it was.
The train is upon you.
It is, but at what cost? At what cost? Another Jarl battle before the end of the day? Who knows? God, I'm trying. It's bloody hard to even like pick a lineup.
Wake up the neighbors. Are you hearing this or what? It's your home. Am I getting through to you? Show me what you got.
PVS, yep.
I'm counting on
Nonsense Merchant at God. Well, so Ereman, that was a larger portion of Dan's video, is that the need for mods, are the mods themselves Paratext, or are they the result of something that has happened due to it? Like, that's where it gets fascinating. That's kind of where we didn't go hard on the discussion of mods. Oh. Wait, Kestrel, who was the second
That
person?
sounds like a challenge.
Hey, I'm not challenging you all. It is up to your good selves. Wait a second. Paratext is people! Paratext is people! Lots. Fucking yo. Alright, 20 seconds on the clock. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, Restless Roots, if it makes you feel any better, I have the same thoughts that keep me awake at night. But we have the Discord, so we can wax lyrical on there. Oh, did that go through? Alright, on my screen, it was like 0 and then continued. I'm waiting to see what the train says. Yep, no, it's still going. Alright, you're stuck with me. Stooge, fucking yo! Also, the Yaldum is your Stooge. What were you doing? Chew, motherfucking chew. Right, yeah, you got me for 5 more minutes. Oh. Yeah.
See, this is why we only tease about the cult leader bit. You can only suggest a direction. We enjoy the chaos too much to not deviate.
That's a good point. If this was a cult, then I would have some modicum of control over you lovely Mother Hubbards, which I do not! But yeah, so like Restless Roots, I'm not saying this just to keep you awake at night, but like, when it gets to the essential mods conversation, that's essentially like...
Until the train ends sounds like a challenge for an endless train.
That is, I am not challenging anyone to an endless train, alright? I'm not challenging anyone. It is up to your good selves. I am very grateful for it all because it means I can feed those loud, greedy guinea pigs. And, you know, I get to keep doing this. But jumping back. The concept of mods as being essential creates this idea that you need to sit outside the text.
Choo-choo.
Like, what we're talking about, like, with fighting games, where the fighting games don't tell you need to go outside of the space. and other people might be able to educate, but the idea that there's certain paratext that is essential. There are certain mods that you have to have, and you have to bolt them into the experience. I mean, at that point, like, we're basically chefs. You know, mods being the condiments on top.
Will isn't the cult leader, he is the mascot.
Oh, I'm the mascot, am I? Oh, I was Calcium Bloody Borneo! The heck? Yeah, Lawrence. Skyrim mods, which ones are the essentials? Which ones are the perceived essentials? Is Nexus Mod Hub a paratext of video games? Like, wow. Now, I do agree with what Dan was saying at the beginning of the show that paratext as a conversation can be a little obnoxious. Okay! The reign of Jarl Stooge was brief. Angel Kalina went now. Angel Kalina, thank you. That is $10 to keep this place going, you fucking legend. But yeah, so Lance, the meta refers to the optimal path. What is the meta of a narrative experience? Is there an optimal way to
You're just the figurehead
story?
of the longship. Your illusion of control is an illusion in and of itself.
Hey, in my defense, I am under no illusions as to how little control I have here. What is he? Barbles, yeah. Community bug fix. You want to get fucking wild? Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Nigh on unplayable without the community mods to get it running. That include like quality of life updates, expanded quests, and the functionality you need to get that Mother Hubbard to actually start. Like, this is one of the reasons why I was saying, like...
You pointed out a meta for Rain World's narrative.
Fearless, I couldn't possibly comment, but stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say on that one. And also, thank you for things. Like, Naruhoodie as well and everybody. Like, feckin' yo!
Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. I got a new flavor coffee. I got an old flavor wrap. Equip the A1.
Oh, Errolman's pointing out... Caldra, thank you. Errolman's pointing out that in Stardew Valley, there's clearly a meta to the story. But that is because that the story has a clear goal, and that goal is mechanical. But, like... You know, what is the optimal path through the story of Skyrim? Like, what is the meta of the narrative? Not meta-narrative, but the meta of the narrative of Skyrim. To those of you that found our little corner of the internet today, this is the kind of bullshit that we get to. That, Raid World stuff, a lot of Gundams, a lot of industry talk. Oh, Timid, don't even try it. So yeah, Timid, this is close to the thing we're talking about with the Five Nights at Freddy's. So this is Too Mellow's Memories of Tokyo Toe, which is an album inspired by a video game that sounds like it comes from the video game. This is not a Jet Set Radio Future album, but oh my god, does it sound like it is. It's an album to evoke the feeling of a place that never existed. Sage! Dog. Oh look, coffee. Famous Six says, was the core of the player fix for Bloodlines written by some of the former devs? If the former creators are involved in the creation of the paratext, then we're getting into some fucking wild territory. Because, like, we're not talking about artistic intent, because, you know, if a game is made by...
Online. Sensors
Hey!
online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Naruhoodie, thank you.
Have a sub.
And yeah, Naruhoodie, seriously, thank you.
Actually, a lot of times, actually never.
The paratext of Theseus. Yeah, if it's made by parts of the original dev team. But very rarely is a game the brainchild of one or of like a handful of individuals.
Prove your worth.
So like with something like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, you know, that was made by a team of anywhere from like what 15 to 40 people. Like, meaning that how much coming in.
Why not? Snipe.
Bacon, it is your choice and I cannot stop you, but I can say thank you. Fucking legends. And they walk away. Quasi says mods made by the dev team are the video game Snyder Cut. How many mods can you think of that are made by... And I don't mean like... Yeah, how many mods can you think of that are made by the dev team? Park Program's asking if tomorrow will contain Paratext. No, tomorrow we're playing Sea of Thieves, right? So it will contain Paratext! I think I'm extremely funny. Oh yeah, I can give as good as I get. Y'all don't have a fucking monopoly on terrible jokes. I don't know, I had a good time with it, Restless Roots. Edward says, what about the mod by one of the lead devs for Fallout New Vegas that rebalances some of the gameplay systems? Reckon yo. I mean, that's fucking fascinating. That's almost like director's commentary. Yes. Okay, we have 30 seconds on the clock. If this is the end of our little adventure...
Will's joke suffered a divide by 0 error.
I had a great time with it, and I am not going to apologise. However, so if we are making a move, here's what I can offer you all, friends. I can offer you some tunes. I can offer you Vengeful Guardian, Moonrider. Or I can offer you... maybe? Uno? Hang on, let me check that. Let me check to make sure that's... I'm not losing my bloody marbles. But no, seriously, all friends, like, thank you for that. Y'all didn't have to do that. That was fucking lovely. Okay, maybe not Uno. I'll tell you what, okay, what about the Quarry? Alright, so these are the tunes that I offer you. Sadly, and not an egg in this trying time, I can offer you some tunes, or thereby construction of. I can offer you some retro-styly current gaming. So Vengeful Gladiator Moonrider is a very Contra Ninja Gaiden inspired title that came out very recently. Or I can offer you The Quarry, a cinematic horror game of teenagers doing dumb things that they shouldn't but do anyway. What interests you? What strikes your fancy? You decide where we head next! But no, one more time, friend. This has been fucking great. Like, thank you so much for all that you put in. The bits, the goodies, the whole shebang, and you'll keep this whole place going long enough that we get to have amazing days like today, so thank you so much. Tomorrow evening is going to be Sea of Thieves. I've realised I have not checked in with my squad, so if I look very stressed tomorrow, it's because I have failed at organisation. That's on me! In my defence, I was very looking forward to today. PBS says, any stream with dogs? Could do squirrel. Kestrel's voting for dumb teenagers. Artie Poe for retro shenanigans. Alright, so it's between retro and dumb teenagers. What suits your fancy? Come on! Hey, Lance, I've been wanting an excuse to, like, chat with Dan some more for ages, and I kept hoping he'd be at, like, a PAX or something for us to catch up. And honestly, it was only when we had our conversation here in the long ship about Paratext in video games that I was like, nah, I've got to get him on the line. It's too good to leave. Dreamer says, dumb teens is a broad category. And Lance is watching speedrun, so retro? Alright, retro has been decided. We're going to go hang out with El Dirty Squirrel. That should be a nice juxtaposition to our art-heavy banter. Friends, this has been a fucking great day. This is the kind of banter that I thoroughly enjoy, and one of the reasons why I love doing this for a living. So, yeah, this will not be the last time we talk about Paratext in games, but for now, I'll pass you over to Squirrel, and I hope you have yourself a lovely rest of your day. As for me, I'm going to keep working on this this video, which is gonna be a thing, like a whole ass thing, and play Pirate Recruiter. Yeah, have a splendid rest of your evening. Eat hearty, drink well, and I'll see you on the Sea of Thieves tomorrow. Think that's good? I think that's good. To be continued, friendos.